Chapter 403. Grand Xia Imperial City, Jiming Manor. Early in the morning, Ruoshi helped the unconscious Ning Chen into a wheelchair and pushed him out of the room. The warm rays of the morning sun shone down on people's bodies. It was warm, dispelling the cold of the night. The sky was clear, and the responsibility of the knowing destiny state was over. The Eternal Night sect was destroyed, and Lord Yama was sent back. The knowing destiny state, who had been busy all his life, could finally rest. The flames of war broke the Xia dynasty apart. It was time for a change of dynasty, but the Weiyang Palace and the knowing destiny state were more peaceful than ever. People were tired and didn't want to fight anymore. The cavalry of the Northern Meng royal court, the vanguard of the barbarian dynasty, and the rebel army of the Xia dynasty were advancing at an amazing speed. They didn't encounter much resistance and were very close to the Xia dynasty's imperial city. After a series of disasters, the people of the world hated war and prayed for peace more than ever. Maybe peace would come after the Xia dynasty was defeated. Would it be like this? No one knew. According to the headmaster's deduction, the great Xia dynasty should have perished long ago. Perhaps it was during Fan Lingyue's southern expedition, or during the Eternal Night sect's eastern expedition, or when Yama descended. It was already an incredible miracle that this thousand-year-old dynasty could survive until today. It was impossible for any empire to last forever. Great Xia had flourished for 1,000 years, and it was the result of the efforts of generations of wise rulers and generations of marquises. Now that the wise ruler was gone, the era of Great Xia had come to an end. At the same time, a figure from a foreign land stepped into the eastern region. He was wearing blue clothes and had an extraordinary appearance. He approached the knowing destiny state step by step. The genius of the Zhao clan, the son of Dongsheng, was a peerless genius whose talent was not inferior to Luo Xingchen's. He was one of the most promising candidates for the divine bow of the Great Sun. He came into the world today just to find a bow left behind by the Zhao clan in the eastern region 30,000 years ago. A dynasty without fate. Ridiculous. In the royal capital of Grand Xia, 1,000 miles away, another young man walked over. His countenance was filled with arrogance and disdain. However, the aura he exuded was so powerful that it pierced the bones. Even before he got close, he could already feel the heavy pressure. The genius of the Shao clan, Yang Shao, was one of the peerless geniuses on par with Dong Yang of the Zhao clan. No one knew why he appeared in the eastern region. Ding! The sound of the zither was heard, and the rain of flowers fell. In a flying sedan with a gauze curtain, a fairy was playing the zither. A beautiful girl from an unknown place also appeared in the divine land. She headed east and disappeared in the blink of an eye. One after another, extraordinary geniuses stepped onto the road of the divine lands at the same time. Surprisingly, they all had the same goal. Great Xia Imperial City, Manor of Jiming Marquis. The royal city of Grand Xia was the center of the storm. The rebel army of the 9 cities, the Northern Meng Iron Cavalry, and the army of the barbarian dynasty had all arrived at the foot of the royal city. Each of them harbored different thoughts as they coldly stared at the royal city in front of them. With a single command, they would be able to end this powerful empire that had flourished for thousands of years. Within the imperial city, camp after camp of guards stood guard at the various city gates. Anling Marquis' eyes were filled with despair. Great Xia was finished. In front of the city, Mingyu got off her horse. Her delicate body seemed so extraordinary at this moment. She walked to the foot of the city and looked at the city in front of her. A hint of sadness flashed across her exquisite face. "Purple Crystal, accompany me into the city," Mingyu said softly. "Yes." Purple Crystal nodded. She waved her hand and brought along the emperor beside her. Then, she turned into a stream of light and entered the city. At the same time, Crown Prince Barbarian and a Xiantian Venerate also entered the royal city. State affairs were state affairs, and personal relationships were personal relationships. Before the final attack, they had to go see someone first. In front of the Jiming Marquis mansion, the gate opened wide. Ruoshi pushed Ning Chen out. She looked at the Barbarian dynasty and the Northern Meng dynasty's leaders. There wasn't the slightest fear on her beautiful face. Mingyu walked forward. Her eyes glimmered with tears as she softly said, "Bad people, do you blame me?" The Grand Xia's destiny had run out. The strength of the rebel cities wasn't much different. They would definitely fight for the throne again. When that time came, the world would be in chaos. If they wanted to quell this war as soon as possible, the Northern Meng dynasty's best choice was to send troops. To the side, Crown Prince Barbarian looked at the white-clothed figure sleeping in the wheelchair and sighed. Although he was dissatisfied with this kid because of Wild's matter, he couldn't deny that the Grand Xia's Jiming Marquis was the most worthy person in the world. Crown Prince Barbarian turned and left. Before leaving, he glanced at Mingyu and coldly said, "Emperor of the Northern Meng dynasty, it will soon be clear who this world belongs to. I'll accompany you to the end." Mingyu wiped away her tears. Her expression also became cold. The two left and returned to their respective armies. The siege had officially begun. The three sides had tacitly decided to first take down the Grand Xia and then have a showdown. Within the royal city, 100,000 imperial guards were desperately resisting. Thousands of miles away, reinforcements from Qinghe City, Tianfu City, Huaqing City, and the other cities of the Grand Xia were desperately rushing to the royal city. However, distant water couldn't quench the immediate thirst. The reinforcements from the various cities had arrived too late. In one day and one night, the Grand Xia's imperial guards had suffered heavy casualties. The three sides had also suffered heavy casualties. The Grand Xia's royal city, which had stood for 1,000 years, was about to be breached. How lively! Just as the Grand Xia's royal city was about to be breached, a grey-robed youth appeared in the sky. He ignored the rain of arrows and walked into the royal city. Within the Weiyang Palace, Qing Ning sensed this sudden powerful aura and her expression changed. She rushed over to the Marquis Manor. Qing Ning hurried over to the backyard of the Marquis Manor. Seeing the grey-robed youth appear in the sky, her expression was incomparably grave. "Ruoshi, Ningxi, quickly take him away," said Qing Ning. "Where can you go?" Space shook and blue light gathered. Another powerful aura descended. The Zhao family's Dongyang appeared in the sky above the Marquis Manor. "So the two of you are here." The sound of a zither was faint, and a rain of flowers drifted down. A flying carriage with gauze curtains appeared in the sky. The woman within spoke, her voice like a clear spring. "Wu Qingman. Ha, who would have thought that the Heavenly Music Pavilion, which has always thought highly of itself, would also take advantage of the situation?" Yang Shao, the prodigy of the owl race who had arrived first, sneered coldly. "Brother Yang, you're exaggerating. I'm just following my master's orders to invite this marquis back to the Heavenly Music Valley as a guest," said Wu Qingman with a faint smile. Hearing the former's explanation, Yang Shao coldly snorted. If he believed this nonsense, he would be a fool. Not far away, Zhao Dongyang wasn't in the mood to pay attention to their nonsense. He landed and looked at the people in the Marquis Manor. He calmly asked, "Where's the broken death bow?" "Hey, Brother Zhao, there should be a first-come, first-served rule. Why don't you ask after I finish asking?" As he spoke, Yang Zhao's figure flashed and landed below. He glanced at the people in front of him and smiled. "Hand over the heavenly book, and I'll try not to kill all of you." "In your dreams," said Qing Ning coldly. "I like uncooperative people." Yang Shao sneered and took a step forward. He instantly closed in and clawed with 3 fingers. Qing Ning brandished her spear and retreated several steps with a bang. A trace of red flowed down the corner of her mouth. A 5th tribulation eminence against a 3 calamity eminence wasn't on the same level. There was no suspense in this battle from the beginning. "Brother Yang, bullying a woman doesn't seem like the conduct of a gentleman," said Wu Qingman with a chuckle. "Oh, is that so?" Yang Shao turned his head and narrowed his eyes. With a wave of his hand, flying feathers transformed into streams of light that shot into the sky. The poisoned hidden weapons streaked across the sky with blinding light. The curtain flashed, dodging the flying feathers. Wu Qingman suppressed the coldness in her eyes and said softly, "Brother Yang, I offended you with my words just now. Please don't take offense." Yang Xiao ignored her and turned to look at the woman in front of him. "How about it? Have you thought it through? Are you handing it over or not? If you want the heavenly book, I'll burn it for you after you die." Behind Qing Ning, Ning Shi, who had been holding back for a long time, finally couldn't hold back her anger. Lan Jun, who had come from a dangerous building, was never someone who would swallow his anger. The gentle and kind face he showed in front of his elder brother and eldest grandson completely vanished at this moment. Ding! The sound of the zither fell from the sky. Ning Shi, who had just spoken, staggered and vomited a mouthful of blood that dyed her clothes red. "Women still need to know what propriety, justice, integrity, and shame are," said Wu Qingman coldly from behind the curtain. "Two brothers, if you want the heavenly book and broken death bow, why go through so much trouble? Just let them get it themselves." Before her words fell, the sound of the zither changed again. It was a devilish sound that disturbed people's minds. Ruo Shi, who didn't have a martial arts cultivation, immediately lost her consciousness. Qing Ning's expression changed. She reluctantly endured the dizziness in her head and rushed towards the curtain in the sky. "Did I let you pass?" Yang Xiao snorted. His feet moved and blocked her path. He turned his palm into a fist and blasted it out. The fist and spear collided. Qing Ning's clothes were dyed red and she was forced back several steps. Behind the wheelchair, Ruo Shi, who was affected by the zither, lost her mind. She let go of the wheelchair and stepped towards the study. "Ruo Shi!" Ning Shi was startled and wanted to stop her. However, she was suppressed by the zither and couldn't move half a step. "Ruo Shi, where are you going?" Just as Ruo Shi passed by the wheelchair, a warm hand stretched out and grabbed the former's arm. In the next moment, the figure lying in the wheelchair slowly stood up. The wheelchair under her body collapsed into pieces and scattered all over the sky. Then, a beautiful green sword flew out and turned into a bright streamer as it swept straight out. "Ji Ming Marquis!" Yang Zhao's pupils shrank. He tried to catch the sword with his palm, but he felt a strong and unshakable sword intent closing in. He was forced back a dozen steps. "Wrong, it's Ji Ming Marquis." Qing Ning disappeared and instantly appeared in front of the sword. She reached out and grabbed the sword. In an instant, the sword broke through the restriction of the two palms and penetrated the former's chest. The sudden change made everyone present unable to react. Yang Zhao's mouth was overflowing with blood. He reached out and grabbed the sword in front of his chest. He turned his palm and forced a counterattack. Ning Chen's mouth slightly raised. The sword's momentum changed and directly sent the former flying. Ugh! Yang Xiao landed on the ground and barely managed to stabilize his body. He vomited another mouthful of blood. "Miss, my family's womenfolk have not received you well and have neglected you. However, I will discipline them for their mistakes. Can you stop playing the zither?" Ning Chen raised his head and looked at the woman on the palanquin in the sky. Inside the gauze curtain, Wu Qingman reached out and pressed the strings of the zither. Drops of blood silently dripped from the corner of her mouth. On the zither cast in black gold, a clear sword mark appeared unknowingly. It penetrated the body of the zither and was unusually dazzling. Chapter 404. Knowing destiny had awakened, and the power of the sword shocked everyone present. His robes fluttered in the wind. He had finally awakened at the most critical moment. After the divine tribulation, most of the remaining cultivators of the divine prefecture had been in seclusion, which gave the outsiders a chance to invade. However, even a tiger who had fallen from grace could not be bullied by a dog. The murderous intent on the knowing destiny sword was so cold that it sent chills down people's spines. The divine weapon that had once been stained with the blood of the gods had appeared again. Although the original aura had not been released, it had already frightened the three present. Jiming Marquis, do you really think you can stop the three of us by yourself? Wu Qingman's expression turned cold as she spoke. Is it very difficult? Ning Chen raised his head and looked at her with a half-smile. It seemed like he was looking down on her and ignoring her. Wu Qingman's heart skipped a beat, and her face was extremely ugly. She had seen many arrogant people, but it was the first time she saw someone who dared to be so arrogant in the face of three cultivators. Zhao Dongyang narrowed his eyes. The knowing destiny Marquis of the Great Xia deserved his reputation. With a wave of his hand, the sun drew the bow. Rays of light from the arrows flew out directly toward the people in front of him. The blazing fire surged in the light of the arrows. Every inch forward, the arrows became stronger. Sword form, Nirvana. Ning Chen waved his sword, and rays of light appeared and turned into a sword flow. The majestic sword will came out easily. The power of the Nirvana sword was earth-shattering. It instantly destroyed the arrows in the way and continued to fly forward. The sword will was unparalleled. Zhao Dongyang and Yang Xiao were enveloped by it at the same time. They had no choice but to work together to block the Nirvana sword. The two of them blocked the sword, but after a loud bang, they both took 3 steps back. Blood dripped from the corners of their mouths. After being defeated in one move, the two geniuses of the younger generation found it hard to accept. Enduring their injuries, they forcefully circulated their quintessence and gathered the wind and clouds in all directions. Immediately, the wind howled and the city walls were set ablaze. A powerful move was unleashed. The wind helped the fire. The two moves flowed together and attacked the knowing destiny sword. The powerful power could burn the sky and boil the sea. Ning Chen stood still like a mountain. The origin spread out from his sword. Endless cold chi spread out at an extremely fast speed. He blocked out the incoming attacks with his sword. The sharp sword intent shot out through the fiery light, blowing away the two warriors in front of him again. Blood dripped from their bodies. Before the knowing destiny sword, the owl could not spread its wings, and the sun could not rise from the east. In the sky, Wu Qingman saw that the situation was unfavorable. She plucked the zither strings with both hands. Wave after wave of zither waves spread out. Immediately, the earth rumbled and trembled. Yellow soil flew up and leaves fell like rain. The sound of the zither came from all directions, trapping the knowing destiny state cultivators. However, at this moment, Sui flashed and disappeared. In this world, there might be someone who could seal the knowing destiny state cultivator's spiritual awareness, but it was definitely not Wu Qingman. The white-clothed figure hovered in the air. The cold sword in his hand was placed beside the woman's neck. Threads of vermilion dyed the sword edge red. If it had been half an inch more, she would have died. Wu Qingman's body trembled. Her eyes flashed with disbelief. She couldn't understand why the difference in strength between them was so great. Knowing destiny Marquis, spare her life. Consider it as giving me face. At this moment, Nu Chang arrived and appeared on the battlefield. Ning Chen glanced at Nu Chang and moved his sword away. He didn't want to kill her again. Although his consciousness wasn't complete when he was unconscious, he could still sense the aura of the person who saved him. The arrival of Nu Chang shocked everyone again. The terrifying pressure from the woman in front of them wasn't something an ordinary 3-disaster stage cultivator could possess. Let's go. Zhao Dongyang and Yang Xiao knew it was impossible to gain anything today. Their feet moved and they quickly retreated. Wu Qingman coldly snorted. With a wave of her delicate hand, the carriage flew out and also quickly went away. After the three left, Ning Chen nodded to Nu Chang. "Miss, please wait a moment. I still have some small matters to deal with." As soon as his voice fell, Ning Chen calmly looked at Ruo Shi, who was gradually waking up from her daze. "Ruo Shi, change clothes." And Ruo Shi covered the tears in her eyes and nodded. She immediately walked into a side room and took out a wooden box that hadn't been touched for a long time. After opening it, a blue Marquis robe was lying inside. It symbolized the glory of the Marquis for 1,000 years. Today, it finally reappeared in the world. After taking out the robe, Ruoshi helped the Marquis change out of his plain robe and into a blue robe. Her purple hair was tied behind her back. It was simple and plain. After changing clothes, knowing destiny didn't delay any longer and stepped away. Outside the imperial city, the three sides were still attacking. The imperial city was in imminent danger and had reached the final juncture. The flames of war had burned away the crowns of the Grand Xia soldiers. Facing the attacks of three sides, it was difficult for them to hold on. Despair appeared on the faces of the soldiers. If the Grand Xia fell, how would they face the Marquis who sacrificed their lives for the Grand Xia in the underworld? With a rumble, the giant tree once again hit the city gate. The sound of breaking rang out, announcing the end of the Grand Xia. The faces of the 9 city lords were filled with joy. The day they had waited for had finally arrived. At this moment, sword intent descended from the sky and directly cut open the land between the imperial city and the three sides. One sword forbade martial arts, and the world stopped war. The next moment, a blue figure appeared in the sky. The most familiar face made everyone's heart tremble. "Welcome, Marquis." The guards of the Grand Xia were the first to react. Their faces were filled with joy as they knelt down to welcome the arrival of the Marquis. The appearance of knowing destiny shocked everyone. The blue Marquis robe fluttered in the wind, affecting the hearts of everyone below. "Mingyu, Crown Prince, please withdraw your troops." The understated words didn't carry a trace of threat, but the calmness made people dare not refute. Knowing destiny, the long-disappeared Marquis of the Grand Xia had returned today. A trace of joy appeared in Mingyu's eyes, but she immediately concealed it without leaving a trace. She raised her hand and stopped the northern Meng soldiers from continuing to attack the city. Crown Prince Barbarian narrowed his eyes and waved his halberd, blocking the soldiers behind him who were about to charge out. He hadn't thought that he would wake up at this time. On the other side, the 9 city lords saw the figure floating in the sky. Their faces were incomparably gloomy. Hadn't the Marquis all died in battle? Why was the Knowing Destiny Marquis still alive? Knowing Destiny Marquis. The expressions of the soldiers behind the 9 city lords changed. They couldn't help but tremble in fear. Under the heavens, the person they were most afraid of meeting was undoubtedly the Marquis in the sky. In the Grand Xia, from the nobles to the commoners, they all respected the Marquis more than they feared him. However, there was only one exception, and that was the Knowing Destiny Marquis. Towards this Marquis who had single-handedly slaughtered an entire city of rebels, fear had already been deeply imprinted in the hearts of every citizen of the Grand Xia. It was difficult to get rid of it. Amongst the rebel army of the 9 cities, there were many young people from Great Wisdom City. When they saw the Knowing Destiny Marquis appear, their legs unconsciously trembled and they knelt down. One person knelt down, then everyone knelt down. Under fear, large groups of rebel army knelt down and lowered their heads, not daring to look directly at the figure in the sky. It was an unpredictable situation. Amongst the 9 city lords, one of the city lords finally wavered. His body trembled as he got off his horse and knelt down as well. "Wang Qiu, you piece of trash. He's only one person. What's there to be afraid of?" Beside him, a middle-aged man with a bloody scar on his face scolded angrily. The kneeling city lord didn't reply. He only lowered his head deeply. In front of his life, nothing else was important. However, anyone who had personally witnessed the hellish state of Great Wisdom City would definitely not doubt that if they continued to resist, the Knowing Destiny Marquis wouldn't be ruthless enough to kill them all. Ning Chen turned around and looked at the rebel army of the 9 cities in front of the west gate. He said indifferently, "Retreat or all of you stay here. Attack the city." The middle-aged man coldly snorted. He ignored him and gave the order to continue attacking the city. Under his orders, the soldiers once again carried siege weapons and ran out, continuing to attack the city. "Stupid." Mingyu and Crown Prince Man looked at the commotion at the west gate. A cold smile flashed through their eyes. Those who were blinded by power could no longer see the situation in front of them clearly. The moment the order was given, the azure-robed figure in the sky also moved. He waved the weapon in his hand. Immediately, an extremely terrifying sword light shot out. 100 zhang-wide gust of wind followed like a shadow, shaking the heavens and the earth. Whoosh! Wherever the sword passed, thousands of heads flew up. Blood spurted out and dyed the sky red. On the war horse, the middle-aged man's body was directly split in two. He fell off the horse with a bang. Such a terrifying scene scared out of the soldiers behind him. Marquis, please spare us. There was no more luck. One by one, figures filled with fear knelt down. They lowered their heads and trembled incessantly. It was an unimaginable reversal. The situation of the three sides surrounding the city collapsed in an instant because of the appearance of one person. The ground was filled with corpses that were separated from their bodies. The ruthlessness of the knowing destiny Marquis once again shocked the world. Kong Yu, bring the city lords and generals into the city for tea. Don't neglect them. Ning Chen glanced at Kong Yu on the West Gate Tower and said calmly. Yes. Kong Yu knelt down and respectfully accepted the order. The show is over. You can all disperse. Ning Chen looked at Ming Yu and Crown Prince Man and said. Retreat. The two of them waved their hands and ordered the troops to retreat. Now that the knowing destiny Marquis had awakened, the Great Xia would not be destroyed. Even if they forcefully attacked the city, they would only end up like the rebels of the 9 cities. Ming Yu, you did well. Ning Chen transmitted his voice. There was no blame in his words. The chaos of the Great Xia was the source of the flames of war. Ming Yu was not wrong to send troops at this time. To be able to fight all the way here before the rebels of the 9 cities took down the imperial city meant that his and Fan Lingyue's teachings were not in vain. Hearing the former's voice, Ming Yu's anxious heart finally relaxed. She turned around and smiled brightly like a blooming flower. Crown Prince Man led the army and left without looking back. In this war, they had obtained all the resources they should have obtained. It was enough to raise the barbarian dynasty's national strength to another level. With a tacit understanding, Ning Chen did not pursue this matter. Now that the Great Xia was weak, it was impossible for them to be as unyielding as before. After doing what he had to do, Ning Chen did not stay any longer. He waved his hand and put away his sword. He took a step forward and left the horizon. With the departure of the knowing destiny Marquis, the heavy pressure disappeared. However, the fear that suppressed the deepest part of everyone's hearts was like the headless corpses on the ground, unable to dissipate. Chapter 405. In the manor, Ning Chen returned. After washing his hands and changing into his regular clothes, he immediately came to the study where Ruo Chang was waiting. After serving the house's best tea, Ruo Shi retreated and didn't disturb the two's conversation. May I ask how I should address you? Ning Chen asked with a smile on his face. Chang Yu. Nu Chang looked at the person in front of her and said calmly. She was present at the scene of the battle to send the Nether King back. She knew very well how cold this seemingly amiable young man was. At that time, the million rays of blood light were real living souls. Ruthless to others and even more ruthless to himself. Unfathomable, this was her evaluation of the young man in front of her. However, Ruo Chang also knows that although Ji Ming is fickle, he cherishes the people around him very much. Even more important than his own life. Good name. Ning Chen smiled gently and immediately continued, in order to save this one, I've made Miss Chang Yu spend a lot of money. He was clearer than anyone about his situation at that time. His soul had dispersed, his cultivation was crippled, and his vitality had dried up. Practically half of his body had been buried in the earth. It was obvious what sort of enormous price Chang Yu had paid to save him. Expensive? It's quite a lot. 1 soul-suppressing pearl, 3 heaven reversal pills, and my realm's female supreme personally came to help you gather your soul and extend your life with the heaven reversal technique. As for the other heavenly materials and earthly treasures, I won't count them one by one. The woman picked up the teacup, took a sip, and said indifferently. Hearing the woman in front of him, Ning Chen's hand holding the teacup trembled slightly. This favor seems to be a bit too big. Miss, are we friends? Ning Chen put down the tea in his hand and seriously asked. Not really. Chang Yu denied it directly with a strange smile on her face. She said, Jiming Marquis, don't think that I don't know anything about you these days. It's really not easy to be your friend. Chang Yu doesn't have this good fortune. There are a lot of people who died because of this kid. To be his friend, not only do you need to be careful, but you also need to be very lucky. Ning Chen smiled helplessly. It turns out that his reputation has become so bad. The reason I saved you is to get the heavenly book. It's a fair trade. Ruo Changyu didn't beat around the bush and directly said. Which scroll? Ning Chen also became serious and asked. The Bright Chaos Scroll had already been destroyed in the final battle with the Underworld King. Other than Luan Fengchen and the others, no one knew that he had the Void Scroll. Thus, the heavenly tomes that Changyu wanted should be in the Heaven, Earth, and Life Scrolls. The Heaven Scroll and the Life Scroll, Niu Chang calmly said. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. Soon after, he sighed deeply in his heart. The thing that he was most worried about had happened. Miss Changyu, I can silently give you the Heaven Scroll, but not the Life Scroll. This scroll was given to me by someone else. Back then, I might have promised that I wouldn't let anyone else read it. Miss, can you change your condition? Ning Chen earnestly asked. No, we can't do it without either of them, said the woman indifferently as she drank her tea. Ning Chen frowned. He thought for a moment, then raised his head and asked, May I ask why you want the Life Scroll? There were tens of thousands of cultivation techniques in the world, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. The heavenly tomes were not suitable for everyone. Chang Yu had paid such a huge price to save him. If it was just for one more cultivation technique, it was not worth it. There's no harm in telling you. I need to borrow the Life Scroll's special attribute to fuse with any cultivation technique to break through to the Great Circle realm. Niu Chang honestly replied. As for the second half of her sentence, she suppressed it in her heart. Once both of them reached the Great Circle realm, she could attempt to step into the next realm, a realm that no one had ever stepped into before. Ning Chen was silent. After a long time, he said, Miss Changyu, since what you need is the Life Scroll's true essence and not a cultivation technique, then before you reach the Great Circle realm, you'll have to take the Life Scroll's cultivation technique from me. For the sake of a promise, you'll have to sacrifice your future freedom. Is it worth it? Niu Chang's eyes flashed. She didn't care who cultivated the Life Scroll. Even if she cultivated it, she would have to start from the beginning just like him. The difference in speed wouldn't be too great. Moreover, this person had already cultivated it once. If he cultivated it again, it might be even faster. It's not a question of whether it's worth it or not. Since I've promised, I should do it. This is a matter of course, replied Ning Chen. Niu Chang didn't try to persuade him any further. She indifferently said, then you should prepare. We'll leave tomorrow for the homeland of Western Buddha. Ning Chen silently nodded. Niu Changyu didn't say anything. She put down her teacup and walked out of the study. When she was about to leave, she paused and earnestly said, the dual transformation technique isn't omnipotent. You have too much karma on you. Each tribulation in the future will be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. After all, your avatar isn't as good as your main body. If it's destroyed by heavenly tribulation, I won't be able to save you. At that time, I won't hesitate to use a soul-searching technique to extract the Life Scroll's cultivation technique before your consciousness fades. Niu Changyu walked out of the study and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ning Chen gently sighed and walked over to the bookshelf. He pushed open the door and walked in. Within the coffin made of ice and snow, the ghost woman was still unconscious. Her beautiful face was calm and serene, as if she were sleeping. The ghost origin had returned, and the three souls were complete. But for some unknown reason, the woman in the coffin was still unable to wake up. Ning Chen's eyes were filled with pain. When would he ever be able to repay the debt he owed her in this life? Inside the stone room, Sui stood quietly for the whole night. When dawn came the next day, Ji Ming walked out without saying goodbye to anyone and left with Nu Changyu. In the study, Ji Ming stayed behind and transformed into an avatar. As usual, he sat there quietly and thought about things. There was no difference from before. Marquis, it's time to go to the palace and pay respects to the lady. Ruoshi knocked on the door of the study and immediately pushed it open. Ning Chen got up. Time stopped at this moment, turning into a microcosm of the future. Day after day, 7 years, nothing changed. Time flew by like a shuttle. 7 years passed in the blink of an eye. Qi succeeded the throne, Zhang Sun returned to the throne, Kong Yu became a marquis. Everything in the Grand Xia moved forward step by step. Although it wasn't as prosperous as before, due to the existence of Ji Ming, there were no more rebellions. Ning Shi left the manor and with the etiquette of a princess, she was betrothed to the son of Taiping Marquis who was beaten by Ning Chen. After the upheaval in his family, the former playboy matured a lot. He took the initiative to go to the border and inherit his father's will to protect the Grand Xia. In the end, Ruoshi chose to stay in the manor. 7 years were like a day, grinding ink, adding incense, serving tea and water. She never asked for anything and didn't want to change anything. In the past, Zhang Sun didn't mention the 3-year agreement he made with Zhang Sun. The position of the Marquis' mistress was always empty. Even if many officials brought up this matter, it was suppressed by Zhang Sun in the end. 7 years later, Zhang Sun's body couldn't hold on anymore and was about to reach the end of his life. Ning Chen stood silently in front of Zhang Sun's sickbed. He stood there for several days and nights without leaving half a step. Outside the imperial city, lanterns and decorations were hung. A new year was coming. The atmosphere of saying goodbye to the old and welcoming the new spread throughout the city. The city was very lively. When the New Year's bell rang, Zhang Sun, who had been sleeping on the sickbed, woke up. His eyes were unprecedentedly bright. Ning Chen's eyes flashed with a touch of unconcealable sadness. Finally, this moment had arrived. "Help me up," Zhang Sun whispered. Ning Chen nodded and immediately stepped forward to help Zhang Sun. Carefully standing up, he got off the bed and walked towards the window. Behind him, Qing Ning and Xia Sinyu's eyes were filled with tears. They slightly turned their heads away, not letting the tears affect Zhang Sun's final mood. Inside and outside the palace, the lights were so beautiful that the night was as bright as day. With the sound of the bell echoing, a new year had come. "I remember when you first entered the palace, you weren't as tall as me. You were reckless like a child. I didn't expect more than 10 years to pass in the blink of an eye." Zhang Sun whispered as she looked at the lights outside the window. "I was stupid back then. I just offended the West Palace, and now I offended her ladyship. Now that I think about it, I was really lucky that I didn't get my head chopped off after causing so much trouble." Ning Chen smiled. Zhang Sun smiled. Time had truly passed too quickly. Who would have thought that the child she had picked up back then would grow up to this point? Outside the window, in the starry night sky, a crescent moon hung high in the sky. The moonlight was a bit cold, but it wasn't unbearable. The figure in front of the window quietly looked at the scenery outside. After a long time, his arm fell down silently. He leaned on Zhang Ming's shoulder and peacefully fell asleep. Zhang Sun had no regrets in his life. Qing Ning and Xia Sinyu could no longer hold back their tears. They dropped down and knelt down to bid farewell to their loved ones. Zhang Ming's tears soaked his red robes. The Marquis Zhang Ming, who had never wavered even in the face of the gods, trembled again and again. His heart gradually sank. "You still know to come back. This one knows his wrongs. Speak, what wrongs did you do?" "I shouldn't have tied up Qing Ning. I shouldn't have taken the items from the palace, and I shouldn't have faked her ladyship's decree and sneaked out of the palace. I shouldn't have haggled with her ladyship and refused to return to the palace. Good, very good. If you didn't tell me, I really wouldn't have known that you had made so many mistakes. Tell me, how should I punish you? My ladyship, Ningchen, also knows his wrongs. Now that the matter of the true extreme country's envoy is more important, why don't we give him a chance to redeem himself? Since even Qing Ning has pleaded for you, I'll spare you this time. However, I can spare you the death penalty, but you can't escape punishment. Since you want to leave the palace so badly, I'll ground you for half a year. You can't step out of Weiyang Palace for half a year. You can't wait to leave. My ladyship, you must know that my personality isn't suitable for the palace. As long as I stay here, I'll get into trouble sooner or later. I'm the Empress of Xia. Can't I protect you? What are you afraid of? The past flashed past Zhang Ming's eyes like smoke. It was reflected in the tears that fell down. Men don't cry easily unless they are deeply hurt. Chapter 406. Zhang Xuan's death signified the end of an era. 3 months later, in the newly built Heavenly Mandate Palace, Ningchen handed over the Marquis seal and armor, returning the title of Marquis. Qi couldn't stay and watched his master leave with tears in his eyes. He understood that from now on, the rise and fall of the Grand Xia would depend on themselves. In the Marquis mansion, Ningchen walked into the secret room of the study and looked at the beautiful figure sleeping in the ice coffin. Raising his right hand, a faint phoenix cry sounded and a huge phoenix shadow appeared behind him. The next moment, the phoenix opened its mouth and a majestic suction force came out. The ice coffin rose and turned into a stream of light that flew into the phoenix shadow. In a flash, it disappeared. Ruoshi, let's go. After doing all this, Ningchen glanced at the woman beside him and whispered. N. Ruoshi nodded and left with him. In the Marquis mansion, figures knelt down to bid farewell to the Lord. Marquis. The old housekeeper's eyes were full of tears as he looked at the white-clothed Marquis in front of Ruoshi. No matter how many rumors about the Marquis outside, everyone in the mansion knew that their Marquis was the best Marquis in the world. Ningchen stopped and looked at the figures kneeling on both sides and calmly said, "Take care." After saying his goodbyes, Ningchen turned and left, never looking back. In the imperial city, Kongyu looked at the departing Marquis with a heavy heart. In these 7 years, the Marquis had left them with an era of peace. Great Xia had also been able to recuperate and recover. But from now on, whether or not they could maintain this peace would depend on themselves. The divine land was vast, more than 100,000 miles of territory. Ningchen took Ruoshi step by step to the west like an ordinary person, walking over thousands of mountains and rivers. Ruoshi didn't know martial arts, so she walked slowly. Ningchen wasn't in a hurry either. He walked as fast as Ruoshi walked. In this life, there was one person who was willing to accompany him. He couldn't ask for more. 1 month, 2 months, 1 year, 2 years. From then on, a young man in red and a charming handmaiden appeared in the westward journey of the divine land. They were like the most beautiful scenery that would never change. Whenever Ruoshi was tired and wanted to rest, Ningchen would use his phoenix essence to relieve her fatigue. Day after day, year after year. Gradually, Ruoshi's pace became faster. Sometimes, she would walk for 2 to 4 hours without stopping to rest. Ningchen didn't say anything. As usual, he kept pace with the woman beside him. Ruoshi, you haven't seen the sea yet, right? After another 3 months, Ningchen suddenly stopped and asked as he looked at the blue sky before him. What is the sea? Ruoshi's eyes flashed with a touch of puzzlement as she asked. A very, very big river. Ningchen said softly. Due to the arrival of the Lord of the Underworld, the eastern region was forced out of the 5 regions and became a special place. As a result, the people of the Divine Prefecture had never seen an ocean, let alone know what an ocean was. Hearing the explanation, Ruoshi still didn't understand, but she didn't ask any more questions. Ning Chen didn't explain anything and continued to walk forward with the woman beside him. Half a day later, the sound of waves entered their ears, and a magnificent scene appeared in front of the two. The endless blue sea, the sound of wind, the sound of waves, and the sound of wind beating against the stone walls, gradually raised waves more than 10 feet high. The beautiful and spectacular scene was fascinating. Is this the sea? Ruoshi was fascinated by the scenery in front of her. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a strange light as she asked in surprise. Yes, Ning Chen nodded and responded. Is there an end to the sea? Ruoshi looked back at the man beside her and asked. Yes, the place we are going to is at the end of the sea, Ning Chen replied. Since there was no way to wake up the ghost girl in the divine land, then he would go to the other 4 regions to find it. He didn't believe in fate, he only believed in human effort. Looking at the endless sea in front of her, Ruoshi's face showed a touch of embarrassment and asked, how are we going to get there? By boat, Ning Chen looked to the north and calmly said. Puzzled, Ruoshi looked around but didn't see any ships. She couldn't help but wonder, where is the ship? Before he finished speaking, a luxurious merchant ship appeared in front of the two of them amidst the surging waves in the north. On the ship's sail, the word Xian was embroidered in golden thread. It was so clear that under the setting sun, it emitted a dazzling golden light. On the merchant ship that just set sail, young Lord Xian stood at the head of the ship, looking at the scenery along the way with a carefree heart. The money earned from this trip to the Eastern Territory was equal to the Xian family's savings in the past few decades. At this moment, young Lord Liangchen saw 2 figures waving at him from the distant shore. His eyes froze for a moment and looked left and right. They were the only ship on the sea, so they were calling for them? Stop the ship and dock. Young Lord, what's wrong? We just set sail. Chi was puzzled. Could it be that young Lord's head is starting to become abnormal again? Someone wants to take the ship. Hurry up and dock. What's with all this nonsense? Young Lord Xian said in a bad mood. Yes. Chi muttered in response and immediately went down to give the order. Sure enough, young Lord's head was short-circuited again. This was the first time he heard that a merchant ship needed to pull passengers along the way. As the merchant ship approached, an old man came out of the ship and looked at the man and woman in front of him. He didn't know why, but he always felt something was wrong. How could there be such a bold young lord and maid who dared to casually board a passing merchant ship? Ning Chen and Ruoshi boarded the ship. It must be said that in the eyes of ordinary people, Hua Kui's charm was much greater than the red-robed young lord beside her. Young Lord Xian's eyes were shining, and the only thing missing was the word infatuated written on his face. Young Lord, young Lord. Chi kept tugging at someone's clothes and reminded him with a face full of shame. If it weren't for the fact that this was his young lord, he would have pretended not to know him. Oh? Young Lord Xian came back to his senses and quickly put away his pig face. Cupping his fist, he asked, This one is Xian Liangchen, how should I address you? Ning Chen. Ning Chen calmly said. Good name. Young Lord Xian gave a thumbs up and continued to ask, Brother Ning is also going to the southern tomb? I've been in the eastern domain for a long time, so I'm ready to go out and see the scenery of the other domains. Ning Chen replied. Brother Ning is in such a good mood. Young Lord Xian's tone was full of envy. Ha! Ning Chen smiled. He could also see that this young Master Xian was not an ordinary person. It was not because of his identity or cultivation, but because his breadth of mind and bearing was not something an ordinary person could compare with. It made people have a whole new level of respect for him. Chi, go arrange a guest room for Brother Ning and this girl to rest first. Young Lord Xian turned around and ordered. Chi nodded and stepped forward. Young Lord Ning, please. Thank you. Ning Chen thanked him and immediately walked forward with Ruoshi. After the two left, young Lord Xian's eyes flashed with light. He said to himself, this girl is even more beautiful than Miss Susu of the White Knight House. It's really unreasonable. Young lord, this red-clothed young man is not an ordinary person. Be careful. The old man came over and reminded him. Young lord, I'm not an ordinary person either. Besides, don't I have Uncle Ling? Young Lord Xian laughed. In the guest room, the furnishings were simple and plain. Compared with the luxurious appearance of the ship, it was much more pleasing to the eye. Young Lord Xian only arranged a guest room for them. What he was thinking in his head, even a fool could guess. Ning Chen didn't point it out, and Ruo Shi also didn't care. As usual, she did what she needed to do. After Achi left, the woman began to freshen up. She took off her hairpin in front of the bronze mirror. Her black hair cascaded down like a waterfall, so beautiful that it was intoxicating. Among all the women he had met in his life, Ruo Shi was absolutely not inferior to anyone in terms of appearance. In the past, she was the most beautiful woman in the entire Grand Xia dynasty. After all these years of accumulation, she had reached the most beautiful period of her life. She was even more elegant and dazzling than before. Young lord, do you think people cannot age? Ruo Shi looked at herself in the mirror and asked softly. On the side, Ning Chen, who was thinking about something, came back to his senses. After thinking for a moment, he said, the Xiantian realm can preserve one's appearance. In addition, there should also be some rare treasures that can slow down the aging process. Speaking up to here, Ning Chen glanced at the woman's face reflected in the bronze mirror and smiled. What's wrong? Are you afraid your young lord won't want you anymore if you're not beautiful anymore? Ruo Shi chuckled and responded, N. Rumor has it that dragon liver and phoenix gallbladder have the effect of preserving one's appearance. If you encounter a flood dragon, young Lord Xian will bring back a piece of dragon liver for you. Ning Chen smiled. Okay. Ruo Shi's eyebrows curved as she nodded. You rest first, I'll go outside for a walk. On the way, I'll ask young Lord Xian some things about the southern tomb. Ning Chen got up and said. Outside the cabin, the sun had already set and night had arrived. The sky was filled with twinkling stars, and the bright moon sprinkled down a lustrous white splendor that was reflected in the seawater, reflecting the clear and crystalline waves of light. The night on the sea was very beautiful. The sky was wide and the earth was wide, making one's heart feel unprecedentedly comfortable. Young Lord Xian sat at the bow of the ship, swaying back and forth to enjoy the scenery, but he wasn't afraid of falling off the ship. Ning Chen came over and didn't disturb him. Standing on the edge of the ship, he looked at the gradually disappearing divine land with a touch of imperceptible sadness in his calm eyes. Brother Ning, it's a beautiful day with beautiful women accompanying you, but you're here enjoying the sea breeze. What a killjoy. On the bow of the ship, young Lord Xian looked back at the red-robed young man on the edge of the ship and smiled. Ah! Ning Chen covered up the sadness in his eyes and smiled faintly. Young Lord Xian, aren't you also enjoying the sea breeze here? AI, it's all tears. When I came out in a hurry, I forgot to bring along my beautiful maids. Now I can only sit here in a daze and sleep alone. Young Lord Xian's face was full of regret. Boom! At this moment, the bow of the ship suddenly shook violently as if it had hit something. Sitting at the bow of the ship, young Lord Xian staggered and almost fell into the sea. Fortunately, he had a few skills and barely managed to return to the hull. Uncle Ling, who was responsible for protecting the merchant ship, flashed out and looked around the ship. His eyes sank. Did they encounter a sea monster? Next to the bow of the ship, Ning Chen looked at the huge figure surging under the water. His eyes flashed with a blazing red light. The giant figure in the sea immediately trembled as if it felt the most terrible threat and quickly sank to the bottom of the sea. It's not shaking anymore. Did we hit a reef? Young Lord Xian murmured with a puzzled expression. Uncle Ling's eyes also raised doubts. What's going on? Just now he clearly saw something around the ship. Chapter 407. The time on the sea was long and abnormally long, but surprisingly smooth. 2 months ago, the ship encountered a strange tremor, but since then, they didn't encounter any trouble along the way. With the southern Toon mainland in sight, the mood of the people on the ship became more and more expectant. After being out for so long, everyone wanted to go home as soon as possible. "Brother Ning, what are your plans after arriving at southern Toon?" At the bow of the ship, young Lord Xian asked softly. "Let's walk around first before making any arrangements," Ning Chen calmly replied. "Since Brother Ning has no specific arrangements, why don't you come to the Xian family as a guest for a few days? I can also show Brother Ning the local customs of southern Toon." Young Lord Xian sincerely invited. Ning Chen thought for a moment and nodded. "Then this one will thank young Lord Xian in advance." "Oh, Brother Ning is too polite," young Lord Xian replied with a free and easy smile. 5 days later, the merchant ship docked. The people who came to receive them were already waiting on the shore. After helping to unload the goods, batch after batch were transported to the various chambers of commerce of the Xian family. "Young Lord, soap." Ruoshi pointed to the boxes of goods unloaded from the ship with a smile. In the Divine Continent, everyone knew that this soap was actually produced by the young lord. The raw materials and manufacturing process were very simple. Who would have thought that it would become a luxury item when shipped to southern Toon? All merchants are profiteers. This young Lord Xian is very knowledgeable. Besides, this is not a necessity for the common people. In the end, the people who sell it are the nobles who have too much money to spend. Ning Chen smiled and didn't care. "Brother Ning, there are still 2 days before we reach Swallow Song City. Let's hurry." Young Lord Xian walked over and called out. "Young Lord Xian, please go ahead." This one suddenly remembered that there is still a small matter to take care of. "After it is done, I will go to Swallow Song City to visit," Ning Chen calmly said. Young Lord Xian was startled but quickly recovered. He didn't ask any more questions and cupped his fist to bid farewell. "In that case, Liangchen will wait for Brother Ning's arrival in Swallow Song City." The caravan set off and Xian Liangchen also set off with the caravan. Under the rolling wheels, the ship gradually moved away. "Young Lord, where are we going now?" Ruoshi's eyes showed a puzzled look. How come she didn't hear young Lord Xian mention anything else? "Do you remember 2 months ago, the ship seemed to hit something and shook violently?" Ning Chen asked. What's wrong? Didn't young Master Xian say he encountered a reef?" Ruoshi was puzzled. That's not a reef. Furthermore, it's following us." Ning Chen turned around and looked at the sea behind him as he replied. The sky darkened, and the people on the shore were already far away. Ning Chen took Ruoshi, and with a wave of his hand, he turned into a stream of light and flew towards the sea. 300 miles later, a red light appeared. Ning Chen sent Ruoshi into the ghost palanquin he summoned. Then, he immediately walked to a spot not far away from the palanquin. With a flip of his hand, the King of Hell's heavenly sword appeared in his hand. With a wave of the sword, the rumbling waves split the surface of the sea. It was a shocking scene. The phoenix body was different from the main body, or it could be said that it was different from a human's physique. With the phoenix origin as the foundation and the phoenix blood as the body, after 9 years, it had basically recovered to the original 5 tribulation realm. However, it was still quite a distance away from entering the 3 calamities realm. During the Battle of Mount Chizhou, Ji Ming was forced to use the forbidden technique of the life scroll, causing his cultivation to dissipate and his vitality to overdraft. Fortunately, Nu Chang saved his life with the ability to reverse the heavens. However, the crippled cultivation had to be recultivated in the end. Ning Chen didn't care too much about his own cultivation. After a brief exchange with Mu Bai 9 years ago in the barren city, he truly realized that there was no absolute relationship between a person's strength and their cultivation. Mu Bai may not have stepped into the Xiantian realm until the last moment, but that sword of his was really not something any Xiantian or even 3 calamities realm cultivator could reach. Of course, if one's strength reached the level of Hell King, everything would be a different story. Under Ning Chen's body, the sea parted and a terrifying beast roar came out. 3,000 feet below, a huge turtle-shaped sea beast the size of an island appeared. The beast's head was short and small like a snake, and its head and tail were hundreds of feet long. It was a monster that had never been seen before. However, at this moment, the one who was more frightened was the giant sea beast. The snake's head trembled as it looked at the red-robed young man in the air. Its eyes were full of begging for mercy. The phoenix was the top existence among the mythological beasts. There were very few who could compare to it. This kind of pressure from the depths of their bloodline made the black tortoise descendant, who only had a small amount of ancestral blood, feel extreme fear in his heart. Inside the ghost palanquin, Ruoshi looked at the monster below with a trace of surprise on her beautiful face. There was actually such a huge creature in the world. "Why are you following us?" Ning Chen coldly asked. "Oh." The black tortoise descendant suppressed the fear in his heart and growled. "I don't understand." Ning Chen directly replied. When the two phoenixes called out to him, he didn't understand half a word, let alone this monster that looked like a black tortoise but didn't seem to be qualified. "Oh." The black tortoise descendant roared again. "I don't understand you no matter how much you roar." Ning Chen unhappily said. "Oh." The black tortoise descendant refused to give up and continued to roar. "Oh my ass. Do you believe I won't kill you and make a stew?" Ning Chen's ears hurt from the roar of the monster below. He was in a bad mood. "Young master, it seems to have something to ask of you." In the ghost palanquin, Ruoshi couldn't stand it anymore and reminded. "Ask? Your young master has everything." Speaking up to hear, Ning Chen's voice paused as a dangerous light flashed in his eyes. Looking at the monster below, he put on a fake smile and said, "You aren't thinking about the phoenix blood, are you?" In the sea, the black tortoise descendant roared and nodded his head, causing waves to rise 100 feet high. Ning Chen chuckled and the brilliance of his sword revolved. Strange things happened every year, but this year was especially strange. He had seen people who weren't afraid of death, but he had never seen someone who actively sought death. Since the idea was on him, he would have an excuse to kill it and make a stew. "Young master, killing is not good." Ruoshi saw the situation wasn't right and hurriedly stopped him. "Oh." The black tortoise descendant felt something at this time and roared in fear. Since Ruoshi had spoken, Ning Chen could only suppress the urge to cut the turtle shell a few times. He glanced at the monster below and lightly said, "You want the phoenix blood, but I have a sword. If you want to die, I can help send you on your way." "Oh." The black tortoise descendant opened his mouth and a drop of dark yellow blood flew out from his mouth. In an instant, a heavy aura pressed down, causing the sea to churn. When the essence blood flew out, the black tortoise descendant's aura immediately weakened a lot, and his spirit also withered. Ning Chen's eyelids twitched, and the idea of killing and making a stew once again came to his mind. This should be a black tortoise descendant without a doubt. Ruoshi had stayed with a certain someone for a long time. Naturally, she could see the change in her young master's heart. She quickly reminded him again, "Young master, it's getting dark. We need to find a place to rest." Ning Chen withdrew his thoughts and understood that with Ruoshi here, it was impossible to make a stew. He unwillingly looked at the black tortoise descendant and said, "You want a drop of your heart's blood for a drop of phoenix blood?" "Oh." The black tortoise descendant nodded and responded. "You can think of anything, but I won't exchange." Ning Chen snorted and said, "Your drop of heart's blood is of no use to me. You should keep it for yourself. Ruoshi, let's go back." After saying that, Ning Chen stepped in front of the ghost sedan chair and prepared to leave. "Oh." The black tortoise descendant was anxious. Its huge body moved, and suddenly a huge wave rose to a height of 100 feet. Amidst the waves, Ning Chen was worried about Ruoshi and didn't move away. With a wave of his sword, the 100 feet wave dispersed. Ruoshi, the young master is angry. Today, we must kill it and make a stew. His red clothes were dyed wet, but in a flash, it was restored to its original state. Ning Chen flipped his palm and pushed the ghost sedan chair into the sky. Then, with a move of his feet, he instantly entered the sea. A sword fell from the sky, followed by a dazzling stream of light, crashed into the black tortoise's shell. In an instant, 100 miles of sea area, huge waves rolled and quickly spread in all directions. The black tortoise fell 1,000 feet. One roar of fear after another echoed in the sea as it constantly begged for mercy. Ning Chen just acted as if he didn't hear it. Standing on top of the turtle shell, he slashed it twice with his sword. Needless to say, it was really strong. Without using all his strength, he probably couldn't break it. The black tortoise was frightened, but its extreme desire for phoenix blood forced it to try to communicate with the human on its back again. Ayo! With a bestial roar, a blue turtle shell on the black tortoise's back cracked open. The heart-protecting armor flew up and quickly shrank, falling into the former's hand. Ning Chen looked at the turtle shell in his hand and narrowed his eyes. This was to make him feel embarrassed. The heart-protecting armor fell off, and a blue light flashed on the black tortoise's back. The turtle shell quickly recovered, but the color was different from before. It was unknown how long it would take for the heart-protecting armor to grow again. Knowing that these creatures' cultivation wasn't easy, Ning Chen no longer made things difficult for the big guy under him. He waved his hand and put away the turtle shell. Then, he turned his palm and urged his phoenix chi. In a burst of blood, a drop of blood flew out. It was a looming golden color, showing signs of ancestral reversion. The black tortoise's body shook, and then it nodded fiercely. Its eyes showed endless gratitude. For the sake of your cultivation, I'll help you this time. Be careful in the future. Don't meet human warriors casually. Not everyone is like this young master who is not interested in turtle soup. As soon as his voice fell, Ning Chen waved his hand and sent the phoenix blood to the black tortoise. Then, his figure flashed and flew to the sea. He put away the black tortoise's blood floating in the air with a look of disgust. This big guy has lived for so long, but it still hasn't cultivated to the point of ancestral reversion. How stupid. Ruoshi, let's go. Ning Chen stepped to the side of the ghost palanquin and said. "En." Ruoshi smiled and said. "Ayo." The black tortoise roared and gratefully bid farewell to the two in the air. I don't understand. Don't roar anymore. Ning Chen waved his hand casually. After 2 steps, he took Ruoshi beside him and turned into a red light. Under the moonlight, 2 voices came out from the red light. Young master, did you suffer a loss? I can't say. That turtle shell is a bit useful. Although this creature has a long life, its cultivation speed is too slow. If I can help, I'll help. Oh, Ruoshi doesn't understand these things. But it's good that you didn't suffer a loss. Oh, of course. Chapter 408. Nanling, a divine land no smaller than the divine land. Dynasties, sects, ancient lands, great religions, and other legacies were like stars in the sky, taking root in this territory. For the past 30,000 years, it has been extremely prosperous. Swallow Song City, as the largest city on the northeast coast of Nanling, was endlessly visited by caravans, making this big city the most lively place within 1,000 miles. The Xian family started out as a merchant. 300 years of history wasn't too long, but it has already developed into a big family that spans more than 10 cities. Shops were everywhere, and it was unusually prosperous. Eldest young Master Xian was born in the Xian family, but he wasn't the son of the first wife nor the eldest son. Instead, he was the second son of a concubine. However, the real eldest young master, whether it was his talent in business or contribution to the family, was far behind Xian Liangchen. Not to mention, the Xian family's patriarch was a man of his word. In recent years, intentionally or unintentionally, he had revealed the intention of passing the patriarch's position to the second young master. When Ning Chen learned of this situation, he just sneered and didn't say anything. Schemes that don't appear on the surface are extremely boring. On the street, eldest young master Xian was full of interest as he took the two to browse the local customs of Swallow Song City. Along the way, he was chattering away with excessive enthusiasm. Ning Chen was easy to talk to, but Ruoxi's personality was a quiet one. She couldn't stand the buzzing chatter around her like a fly and couldn't wait to slap him to death. This is Lu Xianlu. This young master opened it with his private money. Come in and have a seat. In front of an elegantly decorated tea house, eldest young master Xian stopped and looked at the two people beside him. Ning Chen nodded and walked in with Ruoxi. Lu Xianlu wasn't small and had 2 floors. Eldest young master Xian led the two directly to the second floor and sat down in front of a table near the window. Ruoxi stood behind her young master and didn't take a seat. Although her young master didn't care about the red tape, she did. Ding! The sound of a pipa echoed in the pavilion. The light sound directly reached people's hearts, simple but so beautiful. Ning Chen followed the voice and looked to the other side of the second floor. He saw a plainly dressed young lady sitting there, quietly playing the pipa for every customer. From the way the girl was dressed, it could be seen that she was the daughter of a poor family. Her appearance could not be said to be very beautiful, but she was unusually delicate and pretty. Her eyes were clean and firm, without the slightest trace of self-pity. Ning Chen turned around and looked at young Master Xian's unprecedentedly calm demeanor. He smiled faintly. Since ancient times, heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. Although this young Master Xian was not a hero, he was indeed a good person. Young Master Xian, didn't you just say that you opened Lu Xian restaurant with your own money? Ning Chen asked while drinking the tea in his hand. Not bad, right? Young Master Xian came back to his senses and replied. You have an ulterior motive. Ning Chen smiled and said. What do you mean? Young Master Xian was startled, not understanding the meaning of the former's words. Ruoxi, on the other hand, understood the meaning behind his words. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a touch of surprise as she slightly changed her view of this seemingly sloppy playboy. Smash it! It was at this moment a huge commotion rang out from the first floor. A large group of people broke into the tea house and smashed everything in sight. The guests were so frightened that they immediately fled in panic. Xian Liangchen's face turned cold as he stood up and quickly walked downstairs. Second young Master Xian, I trust you have been well since we last met. A cold female voice came from behind. Surrounded by the crowd, a woman in a purple dress walked up to the second floor. Her slightly raised eyes were filled with indifference and ruthlessness, making people not dare to look directly at her. Zhao Ling. Seeing the person who came, Xian Liangchen's face immediately turned ugly. Why is she here? What are you still standing there for? Continue to smash. Zhao Ling glanced at the group of people behind her and coldly said. As soon as her voice fell, a group of burly men came out, lifted the tables and chairs, and began to smash them. Loud bangs rang out one after another, shaking the entire Lu Xian restaurant. Miss Zhao, you and I have no grievances in the past, nor do we have any enmity today. Don't you think you have gone too far? Xian Liangchen calmed down and said. So what if I'm bullying you? Zhao Ling ridiculed. Her gaze shifted and noticed a woman holding a pipa not far away. She sneered and said, Take her away. 2 burly men stepped forward, grabbed the pipa, and were about to take the woman away. At this moment, Xian Liangchen, who had been restraining himself, finally couldn't bear it anymore. Stamping his foot, he leaped out and arrived at the other side of the tea house in 2 breaths. With a punch and a kick, the 2 burly men immediately flew out and fell to the ground. Are you okay? Xian Liangchen looked at the woman behind him, his face full of concern. I'm fine, thank you young Master Xian. Jia Qi recovered from the panic and softly thanked him. A hero saves a beauty, a talented man and a beautiful woman, a perfect pair. Ning Chen reviewed all the words he could think of in his mind. The days of fighting and killing were too long, and his literary talent of the past was almost all gone. Young master. Seeing her young master's mind running off to who knows where, Ruoshi gently pulled his clothes and called out. Ning Chen came back to his senses and drank the tea in his hand while watching the show. Fortunately, these people hadn't hit him yet, otherwise he wouldn't even have a cup of tea to drink. Young master, aren't you going to help? Ruoshi whispered. Help? What help? It's just a fight. The hero saves the beauty. Your young master goes up and does not have any justification. Ning Chen decisively shook his head. He hated fighting now. After so many years of fighting, he was tired of it. Moreover, this young master Xian's martial arts foundation wasn't bad. Among ordinary people, he was a powerful figure who could fight against dozens of people. Against these people, one hand was enough. Xian Liangchen, you dare to touch this princess's people? Are you tired of living? Zhao Ling's expression sank. Picking up a teacup, she directly threw it out of the window. With a loud bang, the teacup that had fallen out of the window shattered into pieces. Along with the clanging of footsteps, groups of armored soldiers quickly rushed over from not far away and surrounded the entire Lucien restaurant. Princess. A young general came upstairs with more than 10 blue-armored soldiers and respectfully saluted. Seal the Lucien restaurant. In addition, put this woman in prison. Zhao Ling coldly ordered. Yes. The general accepted the order and led the soldiers behind him to arrest the woman. Zhao Ling, what crime did Miss Jiqi commit? In your eyes, is there any law? Xian Liangchen blocked the front with a gloomy expression. In Swallow Song City, this princess's words are the law. Take her away. Zhao Ling coldly shouted. The general no longer hesitated and immediately moved to arrest the woman. Xian Liangchen's anger couldn't be suppressed. Encountering such a disaster for no reason, he couldn't stand it anymore. Stepping forward, he grabbed a soldier and directly threw him out. With a bang, the soldier who was thrown out hit 4 or 5 people. Suddenly, everyone was thrown into a mess. Ruoshi, do you think this Zhao family is the same Zhao family that always wants to rob my things? Ning Chen looked back at the woman beside him and asked. Ruoshi can't tell. Did young master see anything? Ruoshi shook her head and replied. In her opinion, it shouldn't be. There were so many surnames in the world, how could there be such a coincidence? No. Ning Chen simply replied, I also can't tell. I just heard that a woman's sixth sense is more accurate, so I was just casually asking. According to Luo Xingchen, the people of the central region's Zhao family were overbearing and unreasonable. Today, seeing this princess surnamed Zhao, it was very similar. At this time, Zhao Ling finally noticed the 2 people sitting by the window and watching the play. She frowned. Who were these 2 people? Although Zhao Ling was overbearing, she wasn't a fool. The red-robed young man and the maid beside him were too calm. It was really abnormal for a maid to have such courage. See, do it. Zhao Ling was worried about new problems and didn't want to delay any longer. She said to a skinny old man behind her. Yes. The old man stepped forward and his body shot forward. His right hand turned into a claw and grabbed at Xian Liangchen. Bang! Xian Liangchen's fist met the attack head-on. A powerful shockwave spread out around the 2 people. The broken table and chairs were immediately sent flying 4 or 5 meters away. San, you also go. Zhao Ling said. Yes. A middle-aged man walked out. His figure flashed, and a cold sword drew a dazzling light as it pierced toward Xian Liangchen's chest. This merciless sword showed its master's heartlessness. It also showed Zhao Ling's ruthlessness. This was a premeditated scheme that made it impossible for people to retreat. Princess, you've already established your power. There's no need to kill him. Where it's possible to let people off, you should spare them. As he spoke, his red robes flashed. Zhao Ling only saw a blur in front of her. When she came back to her senses, the red-robed young man was already in the middle of the battle. He held a tortoise shell in his hand and blocked Xian Liangchen's sword. Her black hair cascaded down her back. Zhao Ling's expression changed as she looked at the red-robed young man's other hand. In that instant, she had removed the hairpin from his head. An expert. The same thought flashed through everyone's minds. Ah San's expression also changed. His sword changed direction and pressed toward the young man in front of him. However, the tortoise shell blocked the sword, making it so that the sword in the swordsman's hand was unable to pass even half a step. Back down. Ning Chen waved his hand and forced Ah San back. Then he helped young Master Xian to the side. He condensed Yuan with his sword finger to help him suppress the true qi in his body. Brother Ning, you actually have such a powerful expert. You really hid it from me for a long time. Xian Liangchen bitterly smiled. I thought you could beat them. I didn't expect you to be beaten so miserably. Ning Chen smiled. 2 fists can't beat 4 hands. Moreover, they have swords in their hands. Xian Liangchen helplessly said. This girl is not bad. She's much stronger than those in your manor. Ning Chen glanced at the worried girl beside young Master Xian. Brother Ning, don't talk nonsense. I still haven't married. How could there be anyone in my manor? Xian Liangchen hurriedly explained. Ah, what are you in such a hurry for? What I said was that she's much better than those maids in your manor. Ning Chen smiled. Xian Liangchen's expression froze. He glanced at the girl beside him. His eyes flashed with uneasiness. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Seeing this, Ning Chen didn't say anything more. As for whether or not young Master Xian could seize the opportunity, that was up to him. Princess, you dropped your hairpin. After finishing his business, Ning Chen turned his head and looked at the purple-robed girl. He extended his hand and handed over the hairpin. Chapter 409. The second floor of Lucien building was filled with broken tables, chairs, and broken porcelain. Zhao Ling's side had many people and many blades, but at this moment, they were abnormally nervous. The red-clothed youth in front of them was a bit too strong. It was no longer something that could be solved with many people and blades. A hairpin was in the hands of the red-clothed youth, but no one dared to take it. Expert, concubine Chao Tianji asks for guidance. At this moment, a ray of light flashed and entered the battle. A 3-foot-long sword swallowed the red-clothed youth like a poisonous snake. With a clang, the silver hairpin blocked the sword. Before they could even turn their eyes, another extraordinary figure appeared, joining hands to fight knowing destiny. Father! Seeing the man appear beside her, Zhao Ling was startled and bowed. Watch the battle first. The city lord of Swallow Song said calmly. Concubine Chao Tianji and Bai Shaoran, the 2 strongest generals under the city lord of Swallow Song, were joining hands to fight knowing destiny. Xian Liangchen grabbed Jia Qi's arm and retreated to the side. He looked at the city lord of Swallow Song, who had appeared in Lucien building. His expression became heavy. Even a relative of the imperial family had come. It seemed that today's matter was more complicated than he had imagined. In one battle, 2 swords were so extraordinary. Every move and style was the pinnacle of strength. On the other hand, the red-clothed youth in the sword stepped on flowing light and swam among the sword shadows. The sword didn't touch his body, which shocked everyone present. The city lord's expression froze. What a powerful youth! Concubine Chao Tianji and Bai Shaoran couldn't even test his strength. This is a meaningless battle. Stop! Ning Chen stopped in his tracks. The silver hairpin in his hand stopped the wind and clouds. With a clanging sound, 2 swords and 2 shadows were sent flying out of the room. The battle stopped. Concubine Chao Tianji and Bai Shaoran retreated several steps. After stabilizing themselves, they didn't attack again. They knew that the youth in front of them had already held back. If they continued to force him, it would be unwise. I am the city lord of Swallow Song. May I ask for your name? The city lord walked out and asked seriously. I wouldn't dare to ask for your name. I am Ning Chen. Greetings, city lord, Ning Chen said politely. Ah, heroes come from the young. Since we're fortunate enough to meet, why don't you come to my residence? The city lord invited. City lord is too kind. It's just that it's getting late. I'll definitely pay you a visit another day, Ning Chen said with a smile. In that case, this Xiao will wait for little brother Ning in the mansion. City lord Yen Gu responded. Then, he glanced at the group of people behind him and said indifferently, let's go. After saying that, everyone left. Before they left, they looked at the red-clothed young man with dread in their eyes. Since when did such a terrifying figure appear in Swallow Song City? No one could figure him out. He was probably on par with the young geniuses from the eastern border. Princess, I'll return the hairpin to you. Ning Chen waved his hand, and the hairpin flew out towards Zhao Ling, who was about to leave. Zhao Ling stopped and smiled. Then, with a wave of her delicate hand, she sent the hairpin back. I'll leave it to young master as a souvenir. The beautiful figure gradually disappeared into the distance, leaving behind her final words. The hairpin in his hand was exceptionally cold. Brother Ning, this vicious and merciless princess seems to have taken a fancy to you. Eldest young master Xian came over and said with a smile. Oh, I don't know if she likes me or not, but I do know that you're in big trouble right now. Ning Chen handed the hairpin to Ruoxi, then looked at eldest young master Xian and said with a slight smile. Xian Liangchen smiled bitterly. This unprovoked disaster came too suddenly. He rarely had any dealings with the Zhao family and had never offended this princess. Today's matter was too outrageous. Ning Chen guessed a few things, but he didn't say anything. Today's martial arts show, whether it was true or not, the result would soon be clear. Eldest young master Xian arranged the follow-up arrangements for Lu Xianlu. Then, he sent someone to send Miss Jiqi back. His calm mind was very different from the usual spoiled brat. By the time everything was settled, the sun was already setting in the west. Eldest young master Xian looked apologetically at Ning Chen, who was sitting on the first floor and drinking tea. Brother Ning, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. It wasn't a long wait. The tea was good, so it was worth it. Ning Chen got up and put down the tea in his hand. Next, he would have to face the real master of the Xian family. Visiting someone else's house, it would be unreasonable to not pay a visit. With eldest young master Xian leading the way, the three set off for the Xian mansion. Today's big commotion must have been received by the Xian family. Once they return, there will be a lot of excitement. Along the way, no one knew what eldest young master Xian was thinking. His eyebrows were heavy with worry. Perhaps he was worried about the consequences of today's matter. Since ancient times, merchants have never fought with officials. It's just that Zhao Ling was too much of a bully. At the entrance of the Xian mansion, as soon as the three stepped through the gate, a servant quickly came over and respectfully bowed. Second young master, the lord is holding a banquet in the back hall. You're the only one waiting for you. I know, I'll go there now. Eldest young master Xian's face showed a smile again. When the servant received the news, he bowed again and immediately turned to leave. In the back hall, the lord of the Xian family was holding a banquet. Sitting down were more than a dozen figures, all of whom were direct descendants of the Xian family. Everyone was silent with different thoughts, waiting for the same person. Not long after, Xian Liangchen walked into the hall. Behind him, a young man in red followed with a maid. In an instant, he became the focus of everyone. Liangchen greets father. Xian Liangchen bowed respectfully. I am Ning Chen. Greetings to the lord of the Xian family. Ning Chen's mouth showed an incomprehensible smile as he cupped his hands and bowed. Your presence brings light to the Xian family's humble dwelling. Liangchen, lead the guests to their seats, said the lord of the Xian family. Yes. Xian Liangchen straightened up and led Ning Chen to the seats on the left. The seating arrangements of the Xian family were very particular. Every seat was fixed. Xian Liangchen and his mother's seats were basically at the end of the table. In a large aristocratic family, the difference in birth was always an insurmountable gap. There were several elders of the Xian family and the branch of the Xian family sitting in order. Among them, there was a young man with a slightly pale face who was particularly eye-catching. He wore a light blue brocade robe and was quiet and dignified. He was the eldest son of the Xian family, Xian Hongwen. Ning Chen glanced at the people seated. After pausing for a moment on the lord of the Xian family and the eldest son of the Xian family, he immediately looked away and did not look at them anymore. Liangchen, you have made great contributions to the development of the Xian family in these 4 trips to the eastern region. Do you have any requests? I will definitely satisfy them. The lord of the Xian family did not mention the conflict at Lucien restaurant at all. Instead, he changed the topic to rewards. There was a rare smile on his dignified face as he spoke. What I have done is what I should do. I dare not make any more requests. Xian Liangchen stood up and said respectfully. You should be rewarded for your contributions. The west loft where you and your mother live should also be repaired. How about this? Third brother, you give the empty Donghua pavilion to Liangchen and his mother to live in. The lord of the Xian family looked away and said calmly. Below the seat, a middle-aged man frowned when he heard this. However, he did not dare to disobey the lord of the Xian family. He stood up and said, It's all up to you. Ha! During the banquet, Ning Chen chuckled. Such an arrangement was meaningful. Xian Liangchen wanted to refuse, but was stopped by the lord of the Xian family. He said, No need to say more. This is what you and your mother deserve. Liangchen, why don't you thank your father? On the side, a delicate woman with a delicate face showed joy on her face and reminded softly. Xian Liangchen sighed in his heart. Knowing that he could no longer object, he respectfully replied, Thank you, father. The atmosphere at the banquet was much better than expected. At least on the surface, the father was kind, the son was filial, and the brothers were respectful. Each branch also got along well with each other. There was no hidden sarcasm. Every time the lord of the Xian family asked, Ning Chen would politely reply with a few words. As for whether it was true or not, no one knew. At the end of the banquet, the lord of the Xian family seemed to finally remember what happened at Lucien restaurant today. After a brief inquiry, he did not say much. After a few words of comfort, he did not continue. In the usual and harmonious family banquet, everyone played their role. Before the big interests were affected, no one would fall out face to face. When the moon was high in the east, the banquet ended and each branch returned. Ning Chen was arranged to stay in a guest room not far from the Xian family's residence. As usual, Ruoshi accompanied him to take care of his daily life. Young master, this lord of the Xian family seems to be good to young master Xian. Ruoshi said casually while tidying up the room. Perhaps. Ning Chen recovered from his thoughts and responded. Ruoshi heard the hidden meaning in her young master's words. Puzzled, she asked, Did Ruoshi see wrongly? Ruoshi didn't see wrongly. It's just that there are too many sides to a person. Ruoshi has a kind heart, so she sees the good side. Ning Chen replied. Young master is also a good person. It's just that young master is smarter than Ruoshi. That's why you see more than Ruoshi. Ruoshi whispered. Ha! Ning Chen smiled. In the end, she was still his maid. No matter what, she would always think her young master was the best. The candlelight flickered, reflecting a charming face. After tidying up the room, Ruoshi returned to her room to rest. Her young master liked peace and quiet. At this time, she couldn't disturb him anymore. The night was deep and the moon was cold. In the room, the candlelight illuminated the red dress. It was slightly dazzling. In the quiet of the night, it always made one's mind too clear. But at the same time, it also made one more able to experience pain. Ning Chen got up, pushed open the door, and came outside. Looking at the moon in the sky, his eyes flashed with a trace of emotion. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. The human heart was so terrible. Perhaps, he never understood this cold and heartless human heart. In the city lord's mansion, the city lord of Swallow Song looked at the secret letter on the table. His eyes flashed. He didn't expect the second young master of the Xian family to have made friends with such an extraordinary young powerhouse. It seems that he can't touch the second young master again before finding out his true ability and purpose. Father. Zhao Ling walked over and respectfully said. Has the letter been sent? The city lord asked. Yes, their people should be here soon. Zhao Ling replied. Ling, you must be prepared for both eventualities. If the person they send fails, then this young man can't be provoked anymore. Try your best to win him over. The city lord slowly said. Father, don't worry. The person who sent this time is a top powerhouse from the sect of life extermination, Hong Wulei. It's impossible for him to fail. Zhao Ling calmly said. I hope so. The city lord narrowed his eyes. Chapter 410. In the Xian residence, the city lord of Swallow Song City sent an invitation to the second young master and Ning Chen to the city lord's mansion. He didn't mention the previous incident at 6 Envy Restaurant. When the lord of the Xian residence saw the invitation, he didn't say anything and directly sent it to the West Pavilion. In the West Pavilion, Xian Liangchen saw the invitation and immediately got up and walked towards the guest room. This Swallow Song City lord is really an impatient person. In the guest room, Ning Chen casually glanced at the invitation card handed over by young master Xian and slowly said. Brother Ning's strength is outstanding, Liangchen has benefited a lot from it. Xian Liangchen smiled. For you, it's hard to say whether it's a blessing or a curse. Ning Chen told the truth. That day, if it wasn't for that princess surnamed Zhao being so ruthless, he really didn't plan to make a move. After the incident at 6 Envy Restaurant, if anyone wanted to make a move against Xian Liangchen in the future, they would have to use a completely different level of power than before. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it's unavoidable. Since someone is inviting, it's not a waste to not go. Xian Liangchen said freely. That makes sense. Ning Chen got up. Ruoshi walked in from outside the room. She had been busy since dawn, so when she saw her young master was about to go out, she put down the things in her hands and stood there waiting. Seeing this, Ning Chen chuckled and said, Ruoshi also wants to go. Let's go. After getting permission, Ruoshi immediately smiled sweetly. Her smile was so bright that it was intoxicating. Xian Liangchen was dazzled by her smile and quickly calmed his mind. This girl is too beautiful, it's better not to think of her as indecent. Not long after, the three left the Xian residence together and walked towards the city lord's mansion to accept the city lord's invitation. The fragrance of flowers drifted in the air as thousands of golden lotuses bloomed in the pond. It was an elegant and extraordinary place for a banquet. Today, the city lord of Swallow Song had invited all the heroes of the world. Talents, beauties, princes, and geniuses gathered to enjoy the rare scene of golden lotuses blooming. Originally, with the status of the Xian family, it was impossible for them to be invited, let alone the second son of a concubine of the Xian family. However, everyone knew that the city lord of Yengu had an ulterior motive. What happened in Lu Xian restaurant a few days ago had already spread to all the big families. Many people came to see who this strange young expert was. "They're here." The eyes of a young man in silver robes moved as he spoke. Before he finished speaking, 3 figures slowly walked over from afar. They were dressed in red, and there was no aura of a cultivator. Every step they took was steady, but there was an indescribable feeling rising in the hearts of the crowd. "The rumors are true. This person isn't simple," said one of the disciples. "Greetings, City Lord." Ning Chen and eldest young Master Xian bowed respectfully. "You're too polite." "Men, bring the 2 young masters to their seats," said Swallow Song's City Lord calmly. The maidservant stepped forward and led the 2 to their seats. They were seated to the right of the silver-clothed youth who had spoken earlier. The scale of the banquet wasn't small. From the looks of it, there were at least 100 people present. Many of the children of aristocratic families had never seen the Xian family's first young master before. Beside each seat, there was a maid kneeling to serve them. However, with Ruoshi's arrival, Ning Chen naturally no longer needed her by his side. The former top courtesan of the Grand Xia Imperial City had shed all her glamour and put on light makeup. However, her peerless beauty still made it hard for people to keep their eyes on her. It was difficult for them to control themselves. As for the gazes coming from all directions, Ruoshi didn't care. Her entire heart was focused on her young master. Pouring tea and wine, she never looked at anyone else. To the side, eldest young Master Xian was extremely envious. But when he thought of his beautiful lady, he couldn't help but laugh like an idiot. On the main seat, Swallow Song's City Lord looked at the red-cloaked youth. A light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Everyone had a weakness. If this person's weakness was women, then it would be much easier to deal with him. Today, I've invited everyone here to admire the scene of the golden lotus blooming. The second reason is to make friends through martial arts. I presume everyone already knows that the 100 Empire competition is about to begin. My dynasty's imperial emperor has issued a decree a few days ago, ordering each city to quickly select their 3 strongest representatives. 4 months from now, they will be chosen in front of the Hall of Literature, said Swallow Song's City Lord. As soon as his words fell, Swallow Song's City Lord looked at everyone present. He was very clear that this was an opportunity that every family valued very much. Even if they couldn't get the qualification to enter the 100 Empire competition, as long as they could get a good ranking in the competition, they would still be rewarded by the Imperial Emperor. Today's Shu Dynasty's City Lord was an existence infinitely close to perfect perfection. Sitting on top of the central dragon vein, he sat on top of the dynasty's fortune. His strength didn't lose to any perfect perfection cultivator. If he could get the Imperial Emperor's recognition, then it would be a great opportunity for him to ascend to the heavens. Of course, not everyone was interested in this. For example, eldest young Master Xian and Ning Chen next to him. Eldest young Master Xian knew he had no chance at all. Ning Chen, on the other hand, was really tired of it. In the past, he had no choice but to fight. He fought for half his life from Hotian to God. Now, he really didn't want to fight anymore. Try it, it tastes really different from the lotus seeds at home. At the banquet, Ning Chen peeled the golden lotus seeds one by one and placed them in front of Ruoshi. Ruoshi picked up one and tasted it. She immediately nodded, it's not quite the same. The taste was cool, sweet and slightly bitter. However, it wasn't the kind of unbearable bitterness. The sweetness in the bitterness was very unique. If you like it, I'll also bring over eldest young Master Xian's plate. Ning Chen smiled. Although the two's voices were very low, but the eldest young Master Xian on the side also had some martial arts foundation. He heard it clearly. At this moment, his heart was filled with infinite contempt. He finally understood why the phrase, valuing love over friendship, came to be. The person next to him was the best portrayal. The eldest young Master Xian carefully moved his lotus seed plate to the other side. He had a feeling that someone was really capable of doing such a thing. It was better to be on guard. Hearing her young master's words, Ruoshi smiled and said, "Just try one. How can a girl eat and let her young master serve her? This thing is good for maintaining one's appearance." Ning Chen didn't say much. The corner of his mouth slightly curved, and he directly used his big move. Ruoshi was taken aback. After a slight struggle, she immediately whispered, "Give it to me." Women, ah. Ning Chen chuckled in his heart. With a flip of his hand, a gentle force swept out. The lotus seeds on the eldest young master Xian's plate fell from the table and flew into the plate in front of Ruoshi. The eldest young master Xian was dumbfounded. Can it be like this? Young master, is this thing really good for maintaining one's appearance? Ruoshi looked at the golden lotus seeds on the plate and confirmed again. Of course, when has your young master ever lied to you? Ning Chen responded. Ruoshi nodded with half belief and half doubt. Young master's words should be trustworthy. On the banquet table, the city lord of Swallow Town and the young masters of the aristocratic families exchanged pleasantries. The atmosphere was very lively. Sitting down, Ning Chen acted as if he didn't hear anything. In any case, he was only here to support the eldest young master Xian. It wasn't easy to trick his own maid into eating something. As for whether this golden lotus was good for maintaining one's appearance, only the devil would know. Young Master Ning, I heard your skills are good. Why don't you come down and try out your fists and feet? On the opposite side of the banquet table, a slightly immature young man stood up and said. The newborn calf wasn't afraid of the tiger, so he always wanted to let everyone see how different he was. Kind laughter came from the banquet table. This young master wasn't even at the 8th grade natal stage. Challenging such a powerhouse, the gap was indeed too big. The young man's tone was polite, so Ning Chen didn't want to embarrass him. Smiling, he said, "Young master, we are both at the peak of the 7th grade natal stage. I'm certainly not your opponent. Fists and feet have no eyes. It's best not to ruin the banquet's atmosphere." When the young man stood up, he was a little anxious. Now that he heard the praise of a recognized powerhouse, he was so happy that the corners of his eyes almost narrowed into a line. No longer insisting on exchanging pointers, he sat back in his seat in satisfaction. Nan Mingjin, I can't tell that he's just being perfunctory. He doesn't care about your little skills at all. At this moment, an ear-piercing voice came from the banquet table. Looking towards the source of the voice, a cold-looking young man was drinking from a cup of wine and mocking him. The young man named Nan Mingjin was provoked by the former's words. He immediately stood up and said angrily, "Chu Huai-jing, don't try to sow discord here. If you have the ability, come out and fight. We'll see who's the real deal. You're too weak. I'm not interested. Let your brother come." Chu Huai-jing was unmoved. Nan Mingjin's face turned red. He was so angry that he couldn't say anything. "As you wish." At this moment, a calm voice came from the distance. Everyone focused. Outside when Mo Jingluan, a man in golden clothes, walked over. He was handsome, but not arrogant. Step by step, he walked into the banquet table. Nan Mingtian was a peerless genius from Yangu City's Nanming family. He and Beigong Yu from the Beigong family were called the twin prodigies of Yangu. They were true geniuses. Even in the 100 cities of the Tianshu dynasty, they were rarely seen. "How dazzling!" murmured Prince Xian to Nan Mingtian, who was wearing golden clothes. "Brother!" Nan Mingjin's face lit up with joy. His strongest opponent had appeared. Chu Huai-jing's expression turned cold. He stood up and said, "Nan Mingtian, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Water hook sword, please advise me." There was a flash of azure light. Chu Huai-jing stood between the two tables and waved his sword. His battle-intent sword. "Golden Dawn, I'll let you understand the etiquette of the sword." Nan Mingtian took a step forward and unsheathed his sword. In an instant, an endless amount of golden light shone out. It was like a rising sun, dazzling people's minds. The young geniuses were going to fight. Everybody was astonished. They also wanted to see how strong one of the twin prodigies of Yengu could be. On his seat, the mayor of Yengu City didn't stop the battle. There were 3 candidates from Yengu City. Of the 2 people in front of him, at least one of them would win. The winner of this battle would determine how high Yengu City could reach in the competition. The swords hummed softly as the 2 swords clashed. With a clang, boundless turbulence was created. Chao Tianji and Bai Shaoran moved to the front of the 2 seats. They activated their true essence to block the scattered shockwaves. In the battle, the golden light was blazing and the water hook sword was condensed. They kept crossing each other. The 2 swords had been opposing each other since they were made. Today, they would finally decide who was stronger and who was weaker. Chapter 411. When Imo and Jing Luan, the 2 swords clashed, their sharpness blossoming. These 2 geniuses of the younger generation used the sword to prove their martial prowess. This battle of the peak attracted the attention of everyone present. Nan Mingtian's golden sword was dazzling, like the rising sun, its light illuminating the world. It was a proud sword cultivator, shocking everyone. The hooked water sword was gentle and soft, dispersing the power of the rising sun. An ice-cold chill circulated, opposing each other. The battle between the 2 geniuses was difficult to determine. Every move was top-notch, intoxicating everyone watching. Brother Ning, who will win? Xian Chen turned his head and asked, only to find that someone was still focused on peeling the lotus seeds for his maid. He couldn't help but have a headache. Shouldn't masters appreciate each other? How come this brother Ning doesn't seem to be paying attention? I don't know, don't ask me about the fight. Ning Chen didn't raise his head as he put the peeled lotus seeds on the plate in front of Ruoshi. He didn't seem to care about the battle at all. Young Master Ning, is this battle not enough to enter your eyes? At this moment, a silver-robed young man on the left side of the table softly asked. Young Master Beigong's words are too serious. I'm just not interested in fighting, nothing else. Ning Chen put the last lotus seed on the plate and calmly said. Hearing the 2 words Beigong, young Master Xian looked away in surprise. Could this young man be the other one of the twin prides of Yen and Gu who stood side by side with Nan Mingtian? He had never seen him before, so how did Brother Ning know? Young Master Ning's eyesight is extraordinary, Beigong Yu admires it. But there's something I don't understand. The 100 Dynasties competition is a rare opportunity for every cultivator to prove their martial prowess. If young master has such ability, why don't you want to show it? Beigong Yu sternly asked. I'm tired of it. Everyone has their own ambitions, so I can't force them, right? Ning Chen smiled and replied. Unfortunately, Beigong Yu had always wanted to compete with young Master Ning. It seems I won't have this chance. Beigong Yu sighed with regret. Ha! Ning Chen chuckled and glanced at the 2 people in the battle. Young Master Beigong, you won't be lonely. Before he finished speaking, the stalemate finally changed. Nan Mingtian's body shone with golden light as the sun rose from his sword. The sun illuminated the 9 heavens and shocked everyone present. With a peng sound, the 2 swords clashed, and a waterfall of blood sprayed out. Chu Huaijing had been defeated. Thanks for letting me win. Returning Jin Shi to its scabbard, Nan Mingtian turned around and walked to the side of the table. The battle isn't over yet. Where are you going? Right at this moment, the hooked water rose again, streaking across the air like a cold blade, pressing towards his life. Chu Huaijing, you've crossed the line. A silver light flashed as the long and narrow silver blade blocked the hooked water sword radiance. Beigong Yu appeared on the battlefield and said indifferently. Behind Nan Mingtian, Jin Shi paused and turned around to look at the silver-robed young man. Beigong, when shall we fight? Let's talk about it later. Right now, I want to fight with that young Master Ning. You have to line up. Bei Gongyu's silver blade moved, forcing Chu Huijing back. Nan Mingtian looked over at the red-robed young man and nodded. He really is an expert. However, it won't be easy for you to get what you want. The red-robed young man no longer had any battle intent. It was clear that he hadn't truly fought in a long time. People who liked to fight but didn't like to fight were the hardest to challenge. Let's leave it to fate. Didn't you go to the Sea God Palace at the bottom of the South Sea? Why did you come back so quickly? I ran into a peak sword expert. I couldn't get past him, so I came back. Nan Mingtian didn't hide anything. Oh? Even you couldn't get past him? It seems the Sea God Palace is even more mysterious than we thought, said Bei Gongyu gravely. The two most dazzling heavenly geniuses of Swallow Song City chatted as they returned to their seats. Chu Huijing's expression changed again and again. He snorted coldly and suppressed his urge to attack again. He returned to his seat. Brother. Seeing his brother return, Nan Mingjin was in an extremely good mood. Little brother, don't always be so impetuous. Before, young Master Ning didn't care about your impudence because you were young. But with your little bit of cultivation, you still dare to challenge him without knowing your limits, lectured Nan Mingtian. I know I was wrong, Nan Mingjin said in a low voice with a bitter expression after being reprimanded. This interlude didn't affect the atmosphere of the banquet. 1,000 lotuses bloomed, and the beautiful scenery was intoxicating. Talented women played zither and beautiful women danced, making the banquet even livelier. Just at this moment, an arrow shot through the air. It was silent and sharp, and it was aimed directly at young Master Xian. Everyone's expressions changed. They were all startled by this arrow. However, whether or not they wanted to help, it was already too late. In that moment of crisis, the red-robed young man flashed over and blocked the arrow with his finger. The black arrow shattered. What shocking reaction speed! Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu narrowed their eyes. They took him even more seriously. On the main seat, Swallow Song City's city lord's eyes flashed. Had it begun? After one arrow failed, the attacker quickly retreated without any hesitation. From beginning to end, he didn't leave a trace. Men, chase after him, said the city lord. Yes. One soldier after another came out and quickly chased after Mo Jingluan. That was close. During the banquet, eldest young Master Xian wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Just now, he thought he was dead for sure. In front of him, Ning Chen looked in the direction the aura had disappeared. His eyes flashed coldly. He was very clear that this arrow had most likely been aimed at him. Young Master Xian had only been dragged down by him. City Lord, I suddenly remembered that I still have something important to do, so I won't disturb you any longer. I'll take my leave first. Ning Chen turned around and cupped his fists towards the city lord of Yengu, who was seated on the main seat, before he excused himself. Young Master Xian was startled. When he recovered, he also stood up. If Brother Ning left, there was no point in him staying. Swallow Song City's city lord nodded. Since little brother Ning has something to do, then I won't stay any longer. See you later. See you later. Ning Chen replied. Then, he led the two people by his side and left. Do you want to see what's going on? Bei Gongyu looked at Nan Mingtian and transmitted his voice to him. Not interested, said Nan Mingtian indifferently. Ha, with your personality, you won't have any friends, Bei Gongyu chuckled. Nan Mingtian didn't reply. He drank the wine in his cup and pondered. Outside Wenimo, Ning Chen took the two back the way they came. After a while, a cold wind suddenly blew on a deserted street. It was bone-chilling. She's finally here. Ning Chen stopped and said softly as he looked ahead. At the end of the street, white mist filled the air. A reddish-brown figure slowly walked over. On the blade, a bell rang. It was like the sound of the Yellow Springs. The newcomer was the top assassin of the Yuluo life extermination sect, Hong Wulei. Her beautiful face was emotionless like a machine. She was the most ruthless assassin. Today, she blocked the path to knowing Destiny's state. Without saying anything, the reddish-brown figure disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in front of the three people. Her cold blade flashed and chased after their souls. With a clang, Ning Chen blocked the blade with his sword. Looking at the woman in front of him, Ning Chen frowned and said, "Who sent you? The Xian family or the city lord of Yangu?" Hearing this, young Master Xian's heart sank. "What's going on?" Hong Wulei didn't answer. She turned her blade and slashed. The blade was fast and extremely tricky. She had never seen such a strange martial art before. It was difficult to catch her movements. Ning Chen still didn't use his sword. He condensed Yuan into a sword with his 2 fingers. He fought speed with speed and strangeness with strangeness. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen moves were exchanged. The blade and the sword collided. Hong Wulei, who was as still as a mountain, didn't move at all. Hong Wulei also saw that the person in front of her was extraordinary. She took a step and jumped into the air. She drew the spiritual qi of heaven and earth to her body and turned it into thousands of blade lights. Clang! With a soft sound, 2 fingers met the blade. It was an unbelievable scene. The deadly blade was completely restrained. It couldn't move half a step. What an amazing power control! It seems that our evaluation of him is low again. Outside the battle, 2 figures appeared. In the end, it was Bei Gongyu who persuaded Nan Mingtian to join them. Extraordinary warrior. Nan Mingtian nodded. This person's strength was beyond their expectations. In the battle, Hong Wulei saw the 2 fingers holding the blade. Her left hand moved, and a short blade appeared. She slashed at Ning Chen's throat. Ning Chen's expression didn't change. He flicked the blade and leaned to the side to avoid the short blade. "Aren't you worried?" Young Master Xian looked at the unusually calm woman beside him and was puzzled. This master and servant, one was more strange than the other. How big of a heart did they have to be indifferent to the situation in front of them? "It's just a small matter." Ruoshi replied softly. Compared to the monsters that appeared in the divine great land in the past, this small matter was not even a trouble. "Back off." The sword came again. Ning Chen didn't want to fight anymore. Sword intent spread out from his fingers, and the woman in front of him retreated. Hong Wulei's eyes narrowed. She no longer needlessly attacked. She moved her feet and quickly retreated. "You let her go so easily?" Young Master Xian was surprised. "Young Master is a good person. He doesn't kill." Ruoshi said. "It's getting late. Let's go back." Ning Chen glanced at Duan Feng on the ground and memorized the words Yuluo extermination. N. Ruoshi followed and walked forward together. Young Master Xian also smacked his lips. He didn't take trouble seriously at all. His dog shit luck was really good. He randomly picked up a person who turned out to be such a powerful expert. After the 3 left, Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu walked out. When they saw the 4 words engraved on the broken blade, their eyes flashed. It was actually them. "Nan Mingtian, if it were you facing that woman, could you do it without moving a step?" Bei Gongyu asked solemnly. "I can't." Nan Mingtian honestly said. The woman just now wasn't weak. Her moves were tricky and ruthless. He could retreat, but he couldn't do it without moving a step. "Oh, I can't do it either." It seems this young Master Ning's control of power has reached an unimaginable level. I want to fight with him more and more. Bei Gongyu couldn't hide the hope in his eyes. It would be a pity if such a powerhouse was missing on the road ahead. Chapter 412. In the Xian family's study, the candlelight flickered, illuminating 2 figures. They sat across from each other, calm and tranquil. The Xian family's head and Ning Chen were people who shouldn't have interacted with each other. But because of the Xian family's second young master's existence, they sat across from each other. They were polite and courteous, just like ordinary seniors and juniors. The tea was very hot and steam rose up, blurring the already blurry vision. The study's silence gradually became abnormal, but it was hard to say what was wrong. I heard from Liangchen that it was nephew who saved him today. For Liangchen to consider you as a friend is truly a great honor. The Xian family's head revealed a warm expression. Family head praises me too much. But Junior doesn't understand one thing. Brother Liangchen is open-minded and magnanimous. He's not the kind of person who would easily make enemies. Just who would want to kill him? Ning Chen picked up the tea on the table and softly asked. As a merchant, it's inevitable for them to have business rivals. In a moment of impulse, it's not strange for them to hire assassins. The Xian family's head sighed. That makes sense. If that's the case, then family head and eldest young master should be careful. This kind of person can do anything once they go crazy. Ning Chen kindly reminded. The Xian family's head narrowed his eyes. Thank you, nephew, for your reminder. I will send more people to strengthen the security of the Xian family's residence. I won't let my enemies take advantage of this. That would be for the best. Previously, Brother Liangchen and Princess Xiao had a small misunderstanding. If something happens to Brother Liangchen now, it will more or less cause rumors to spread. That won't be a good thing for the Xian family to build a good relationship with the city lord. After all, if the Xian family wants to do business, we can't offend the city lord. At this point, Ning Chen changed the topic, and a faint smile flashed in his eyes. He said, of course, if something happens to Brother Liangchen, I will be very unhappy. Although I don't really like killing recently, there are always exceptions to everything. No matter if it's the person who hired the murderer, the person who sold the murderer, or the person who added fuel to the fire, I alone am enough to kill them all. Hearing this, the Xian family's head's eyelids twitched. An indescribable chill unconsciously rose up in his heart. But after many years of cultivation, he was able to suppress this bone-chilling cold. He forced a smile and said, as Liangchen's father, I'm really happy to hear nephew cares so much for him. What I should do? Ning Chen smiled faintly, and then he put down the teacup before standing up and bowing politely. It's getting late, so I won't disturb you any longer. I'll take my leave first. With that, Ning Chen turned and left the study, leaving the head of the Xian family alone. He looked at the 2 cups of tea on the table that were gradually cooling down and fell into deep thought. Heaven's will. The Xian clan lord sighed heavily in his heart. Without a doubt, this young man had already seen through something. Such intelligence was truly terrifying. Who would have thought that such a variable would appear at the final juncture? Man proposes, God disposes. In the guest room, Ning Chen returned. Ruoshi stepped forward and whispered, Young master, how did the discussion go? It was a pleasant conversation. The corners of Ning Chen's mouth curled up as he said. Lord, please don't bully Ruoshi for her stupidity. Although Ruoshi can't see through the Xian lord's thoughts, but Lord, I've followed you for a long time so I can still see some of your thoughts. Ruoshi's tone revealed a rare trace of dissatisfaction. Ha! Ning Chen chuckled, Ruoshi is smarter than before, but today's conversation was indeed peaceful. We didn't tear into each other's faces. While speaking, Ning Chen walked to the table and sat down. He poured himself a cup of water. Just now, he was so focused on talking that he didn't even have time to take a sip of the tea. The situation of the Xian family was actually very clear. Of the 2 young masters, the eldest belonged to the type of ordinary person who was good at keeping things, but lacking in development. As for the second young master, he had shown extraordinary talent in business since childhood. The Xian clan lord wanted the second young master to become a whetstone for the eldest young master's growth. Unfortunately, in the end, things didn't go as planned. Now that Xian Liangchen's wings were growing, he brought more and more benefits to the Xian family. Especially after several trips to the Eastern Domain, the Xian family's status in Swallow Song City had advanced by leaps and bounds. The second young master of the Xian family had become the most convincing successor in the entire Xian family. The whetstone failed to sharpen the blade, but on the contrary, it was more likely to break the blade of the eldest young master. The matter of Zhao Ling smashing Lu Xianlu was simple and violent, but very effective. The crime of offending a princess was enough to throw Xian Liangchen into the abyss of eternal damnation. Just as Zhao Ling said, in Swallow Song City, her words were the law. As long as no one dared to testify, it was a one-sided story. For a merchant family like the Xian family, how could they dare to offend an official family? The time and place Zhao Ling chose were also very thought-provoking. Lu Xianlu was Xian Liangchen's private property and didn't have much to do with the Xian family. And when Zhao Ling appeared, it just so happened that they had just entered the building. Zhao Ling smashed Lu Xianlu and ordered people to capture Miss Jieqi. Undoubtedly, she wanted to provoke Xian Liangchen. It wasn't a clever arrangement, but it pressed them step by step, leaving them with no way to retreat. In this world, there was only one person who could know Xian Liangchen's whereabouts, character, and even the person he liked so well, the head of the Xian family. That night, when they came back, the head of the Xian family seemed to be magnanimous. He didn't blame them and even rewarded Xian Liangchen and his mother. It was because of this that he was really sure that the head of the Xian family had something to do with what happened at Lu Xianlu. Under normal circumstances, whether what happened at Lu Xianlu was Xian Liangchen's fault or not, the Xian family would suffer the most terrible suppression for offending a princess. The head of the Xian family was too calm. Thinking about it from his perspective, if he did such a thing, no matter who was right or wrong, the result would be Zhang Sun scolding him. This was not only for outsiders to see, but also for his own people in the mansion to see. Moreover, the head of the Xian family gave Xian Liangchen and his mother to live in Donghua Pavilion, which was under the third master's name. Obviously, he was making enemies for them. If it wasn't intentional, with the head of the Xian family, how could he do such a stupid thing? One thing might be a coincidence, but when one thing after another was added together, it could only be inevitable. Sir, do you really think young Master Xian can't see it at all? Ruoshi asked, puzzled. Xian Liangchen is not a fool. He can more or less see his father's thoughts. However, as a person involved, he will inevitably be affected by feelings. The affection between father and son always makes people think of everything on the bright side. Fortunately, the current situation hasn't reached the point of no return. Since the head of the Xian family still maintains the mask of a loving father, then don't take it off for the rest of your life. At the end of his words, a touch of coldness flashed in Ning Chen's eyes. In tonight's conversation, he had said all that needed to be said. If the head of the Xian family still insisted on taking off his mask and made a move on Xian Liangchen again, then the Xian family would have to be prepared to bear all the consequences. City Lord Manor. City Lord Yen Gu stood in his room with his brows furrowed. His mind was extremely irritable. The assassins from the sect of life extermination failed, and they didn't even manage to hurt the young man. This was really beyond his expectations. Now it seems he really needs to reconsider his partnership with the Xian family. City Lord, a letter from the Xian family. At this moment, a guard came in and handed over a letter. City Lord Yen Ji's eyes narrowed. After opening the letter and reading it, his expression immediately changed. This young man actually guessed it so quickly and even issued a warning. I can't hesitate anymore. City Lord Yen Ji's heart sank. He didn't care who would be the head of the Xian family in the future. There was no need to provoke such a terrifying powerhouse. It wasn't too late to salvage the situation before they shed all pretense of cordiality. In this world, there were no eternal enemies and no eternal friends. Merchants pursued profit and so did everyone else. Thinking of this, City Lord Yen Gu went to the table and quickly wrote 2 letters. After thinking for a moment, he said in a deep voice, "Come, summon the princess." Yes. A guard obeyed. Not long after, a purple-robed Zhao Ling came in. She respectfully bowed and said, "Father. Here are 2 letters. One is for the head of the Xian family. Send someone to deliver it. The other is for Ning Chen. Personally deliver it," City Lord Yen Gu said sternly. Zhao Ling took the letter and frowned. She said, "Father, are you trying to rope this person in?" "Yes." City Lord Yen Gu nodded and said seriously, "This is different from the past. If you can avoid provoking this kind of person, you can't become his enemy." Zhao Ling didn't refute. She nodded and left. Under the moonlight, there were people who were unable to sleep in each of the 2 manors. In the silent night, a cold wind blew, causing many people to be worried. The night deepened, and the moon moved west. In the courtyard, the spiritual qi around Hong Yi's body revolved and merged with the world. It became more and more hazy, as if it would break through the sky at any moment. Suddenly, a silver blade descended from the sky. It was as fast as a gust of wind, heading straight for her. In the next moment, an afterimage wearing a strange mask appeared. His silver clothes fluttered, and the blade swept past in an instant. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. His figure flashed, dodging one blade after another. Then, he condensed Yuan into a sword finger. With a clang, he met the silver blade head-on. The surging sword qi and blade intent scattered in all directions. However, in an instant, it was blocked by the surrounding spiritual qi and disappeared without a trace. "Young Master Beigong, isn't this greeting a bit too much?" Ning Chen released the silver blade in his finger and said calmly. "Heh, you even saw through this." The person who came took off his mask. Under the moonlight, a familiar face was reflected. It was one of the twin geniuses of Yen Gu, Beigong Yu. "There are many people who use the blade in Yen Gu City, but only you have such mastery," Ning Chen said honestly. "Can't we fight?" Beigong Yu asked seriously. "Young Master Beigong should be able to see that I haven't really fought with anyone in a long time. I've almost forgotten how to hold a sword." "Sorry," Ning Chen replied. "What a pity." Beigong Yu sighed softly. He turned his silver blade and returned it to its sheath. "Since Brother Ning doesn't want to fight, I won't force you. I just hope that if Brother Ning wants to fight again, you can seriously finish today's unfinished battle with me," Beigong Yu said seriously. "If that day really comes, I'll definitely accompany you," Ning Chen said calmly. Chapter 413. Ning Chen had sealed his sword and hadn't used it for 9 years. As he said, he didn't like to kill. Ridiculous and even somewhat ironic words, but they were the most serious words. After fighting for half of his life, he was tired of it. As the sun rose, Ruoshi got up early and began to pack her things. Yesterday, her young master said he might leave today. "Young master, will the city lord really send someone?" Ruoshi doubtfully asked. "Well, if there are no accidents, it will be today," Ning Chen replied. After what happened yesterday, the city lord should have made a decision. No matter how late it is, it can't be delayed past today. Not long after, Xan Liangchen arrived. When he saw the packed things on the table, he couldn't help but be surprised. Looking at the red figure in the room, he was puzzled. "Brother Ning is leaving? Well, I've disturbed you for a long time. It's time to leave." Ning Chen nodded. "Why are you in such a hurry? Why don't you stay for a few more days?" Liangchen can also show Brother Ning the different customs of the southern tomb. Xian Liangchen sincerely urged him to stay. "Brother Liangchen, you've shown us a lot of things these days. Ruoshi and I are very grateful for that. However, there are still some things that have been delayed for a long time. We can't stay here any longer," Ning Chen said honestly. Xian Liangchen saw that he couldn't persuade him to stay, so he didn't force him. He sighed softly and said, "In that case, Liangchen won't force you to stay. I hope Brother Ning can come back to the Xian family after you finish your business." "Certainly." Ning Chen nodded. "Second young master, Princess Xiao has come to visit. She said she wants to see you and young Master Ning." Outside the guest room, a servant came in and respectfully reported. Xian Liangchen frowned. "Why is she here?" "She finally came." Ning Chen wasn't too surprised. He left Ruoshi to continue packing and immediately went to the front hall with Xian Liangchen. The reason he hadn't left yet was to wait for the city lord's reply. Now that he was waiting, he could leave with peace of mind. In the front hall, Zhao Ling was sitting in the hall. When she saw the two coming, a faint light flashed in her beautiful eyes. She didn't expect that a profit transaction at 6 Envy Building would lead to such a terrifying young man. Even a top assassin like Hong Wulei couldn't hurt him. "Your Highness," Xian Liangchen saluted and said respectfully. "No need for formalities, second young master," Zhao Ling said softly. Princess Xiao, who was sitting in the middle of the hall, looked as gentle as water, as if she was a real lady from a noble family. There was not the slightest trace of impoliteness on her face. When Ning Chen saw this, admiration flashed through his heart. Putting aside personal grudges, this Xiao Linger was indeed not an ordinary person. She knew better than anyone when to advance or retreat. When it was time to be ruthless, she would not show the slightest bit of mercy. When it was time to retreat, she would not hesitate. "Young Master Ning, this is a small token of my appreciation. I hope you won't refuse it." Zhao Ling stood up and handed over a letter. Ning Chen took the letter and glanced at it. He laughed softly and said, "Ning Chen accepts the city lord's good intentions. Please thank the city lord on Ning Chen's behalf when you return." "I will," Zhao Ling replied. After the business, it was polite greetings. Zhao Ling intended to ease the grievances of that day with the two, and Xian Liangchen did not want to offend a princess of the royal family. Therefore, the three of them talked harmoniously. Those who did not know might think that the three of them were old friends. After staying for half an hour, Zhao Ling left. The two saw her off at the gate of the Xian mansion. "Brother Ning, thank you." Xian Liangchen turned around and looked at the person in front of him. He was not a fool. Naturally, he could see that the reason why Zhao Ling had personally come to ease the grudge between them was because she was afraid of the young man beside him whose cultivation was unfathomable. "Brother Liangchen, this time, I really have to go." "Take care." Ning Chen replied. "Take care." Xian Liangchen sighed. In the guest room, Ruoshi came out and looked at the young master waiting in front of her. She smiled sweetly and quickly walked up. The two left and headed west. The road ahead was long. No one knew when they would reach the place they wanted to reach. "Young master, why did Princess Xiao come?" Ruoshi asked curiously. "To apologize." Ning Chen replied. "What is the apology?" Ruoshi continued to ask. "The quota for the Tian Shu dynasty's competition." Ning Chen replied. "Oh." Ruoshi suddenly lost interest. Such a thing, if the young master wanted, he could get it himself anywhere. Moreover, the young master had no interest in it. He might not even go. "Where are we going now?" Ruoshi asked softly. "To the Jadeite Holy Land to find the method of resurrection." Ning Chen replied. These days, he more or less understood the general situation of Nanling from Xian Liangchen. This Jadeite Holy Land was as famous as the Tian Shu dynasty, but it was an inheritance that existed in the form of a sect. It sat on the most precious treasure of heaven and earth, the Jadeite cauldron. Its attainments in the art of resurrection were extraordinary. He did not know why the ghost girl had not woken up. If he wanted to find the answer, he must go to the Jadeite Holy Land. However, the somewhat troublesome thing was that the old ancestor of the Jadeite Holy Land was a top powerhouse close to the perfect realm. Such an existence was not to be provoked at present. Since he couldn't take it by force, he could only choose to find a way to enter the Jadeite Holy Land. It wasn't too difficult to enter the Jadeite Holy Land. Such a famous Holy Land would recruit a large number of outer disciples. Although it was not easy to go one step further, the identity of an outer disciple was enough for him for the time being. He owed the ghost girl too much, so he could only try to wake her up. Ruoshi didn't say anything. She knew that the ghost girl's matter was a hurdle in the young master's heart. As long as the ghost girl didn't wake up, the young master would not give up. Although she didn't understand cultivation, she also knew how difficult it was to resurrect a person who could be said to be dead. Perhaps, it was impossible. However, she didn't dare to say such words. Because the young master could ignore everything, but this was his reverse scale that couldn't be touched. The Jadeite Holy Land was very far away, almost across half of Nanling. Ningchen walked with Ruoshi while looking for other feasible methods as usual. There were countless strange methods in the world, and the Jadeite Holy Land was not necessarily the only inheritance that had mastered the art of resurrection. Clang, kill. As the two moved forward, the sound of fighting in the distance was deafening. Chaotic sword shadows surged and scattered. There were no less than 10 Xiantian powerhouses fighting. One of them was dressed in brown and red. Her face was cold and elegant. She swung her blade and swayed the sword light that was constantly threatening her life. Rip! Her clothes were torn apart, and her clothes were dyed red. Hong Wulei blocked the fatal sword for her companion behind her. She turned her blade and blocked the sword light from all directions. However, at this moment, behind Hong Wulei, the woman who was being protected flipped her palm and pressed it on her back. With a bang, several feet of red gradually faded. Ah! Hong Wulei's figure staggered. She turned her head in disbelief and looked at her companion, who took the opportunity to retreat. Her eyes flashed with sadness. Why? She really didn't hesitate to betray her own people. The leader of the 11 Xiantian powerhouses, a middle-aged man with a cold expression, sneered. Big brother, don't talk nonsense with her. Since that one escaped, send this one to the Western Paradise. Not far from the middle-aged man, a man with a slightly weaker cultivation coldly said. Hong Wulei didn't say a word. Her feet moved strangely and she no longer wanted to fight. She wanted to break out. You want to leave? It's too late. In the midst of the ridicule, the 11 Xiantian powerhouses moved together to seal the way forward. One sword light after another, not leaving the slightest chance of survival. Hong Wulei's right shoulder was dyed red again. In the rain of swords, her body was like duckweed. One more step and she would die. A pitiful person must have a hateful side. Yesterday's cause, today's effect. Since she chose to live on the edge of the sword, life and death were no longer in her own hands. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from the distance. Two figures slowly walked past. One was calm, and the other was gentle. Young master, do you need help? Ruoshi asked. Life and death are up to fate. Ningchen calmly said. Ruoshi didn't say anything and continued to move forward with the young master beside her. The sudden appearance of two people in the distance attracted the attention of everyone present. Everyone present was a Xiantian. Although they were far away, they could still perceive the existence of the two. Meeting again and passing by far without stopping, it showed that although their masters no longer cared about that day's matter, they also wouldn't help. Under the situation of certain death, Hong Wulei's eyes flashed with a touch of decisiveness. Regardless of the sword light behind her, she swung her Xiantian sword away from the three swords in front of her and immediately rushed forward. Two Xiantian swords entered her body, bringing a big waterfall of blood. One of the swords even penetrated her heart. However, in front of the desire to survive, the woman's footsteps didn't stop and continued to rush forward. Chase! Knowing that Hong Wulei was seriously injured, the 11 people quickly followed. They were determined to eliminate the source of the trouble and not give her any chance to survive. The distance of less than 1,000 feet was so far at this moment. Blood dripped from her chest and dyed her clothes red again and again. The seriously injured Hong Wulei's consciousness became more and more blurred and was close to the moment of confusion. In front of the two people, Hong Wulei finally couldn't hold on. In her last glance, there was only hope and pleading for survival. The next moment, she fainted. She subconsciously reached out to catch the falling woman. When she reacted, she looked at the young master in front of her and flashed a difficult expression. "Put down this woman and get out of here quickly." Among the 11 people, the weakest young man looked impatient and shouted. He hated these playboys the most. If it weren't for his elder brother's order to not stir up trouble outside, he really wouldn't have bothered to speak and would have just killed them. "You want to save her?" Ning Chen ignored her and asked softly while looking at his maid's embarrassed expression. "Yes." She nodded. Looking at the unconscious woman in her arms, she couldn't help but say, "She misses Miss Shi." At that time, Miss Shi also took a step into the dangerous building and turned into Lord Lan. Her situation was very similar to this woman. It's just that Miss Shi was protected by the young master and was forcibly pulled out of the dangerous building. However, the woman in front of them wasn't so lucky. If they didn't care, she really wouldn't survive today. "Since you want to save her, then save her." As soon as his words fell, Ning Chen didn't say anything more. He took a step forward and his red clothes fluttered wildly. Chapter 4:14. With one step, her aura changed abruptly. The surging sword intent spread out in all directions. The 11 Xiantian masters were shocked. Before they could react, they were sent flying. A powerful but murderous sword intent flowed around Hong Yi's body. After 9 years of being sealed, it had melted away her previous murderous intent. If she didn't make a move, it would be hard to believe that the person in front of them was also a martial artist. The 11 people landed on the ground and took several steps back with a dignified expression. Strong. A completely different sword intent. It was different from any sword they had seen before. They didn't know if it was because they were too inexperienced or because the sword above the sword was beyond their comprehension. "Your Excellency, are you trying to make an enemy out of our 9 Heaven Sword sect?" The middle-aged man in the lead said in a deep voice. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes and said, "Is it serious?" Arrogant. The young man who had spoken rudely earlier became furious. He brandished his sword and charged forward. The sharp edge of the sword forced its way into his mind. One sword was followed by 10 swords. The cold light on the swords sealed every major acupoint of the human body. It was a killing move that left no way out. The swords in the hands of the 11 Xiantian masters streaked across the cold light and arrived in front of the two in an instant. Ning Chen raised his hand and released a wave of sword intent. Using his sword to block the swords, the broken swords quickly turned back and stopped the moment they reached the throat. The 11 Xiantian masters were shocked. They watched the two walk past them, but they didn't dare to move half a step. After the two left, the broken swords fell and stabbed into the ground. A cold wind blew by. However, at this moment, the hearts of the 11 Xiantian masters were even colder. Their legs that were fortunately stopped in front of the gates of hell kept trembling. 10 miles away, beside a clear stream, Shi was cleaning Hong Wulei's wound. Not far away, Ning Chen had his back to the two. He was roasting the fish in his hand with a calm and focused expression. In the clear stream, a trace of red drifted into the distance. The sword that hurt the heart almost took the woman's life. Fortunately, Hong Wulei had some medicine on her and barely saved her life. "Young master, come and help." Shi couldn't help but shout to the young master not far away. I'm coming." Ning Chen responded. He immediately put the fish that was almost ready on the fire and got up to walk to the stream. "Here." Ruoshi covered the exposed view of the woman beside her and reached out to tear a piece of cloth from her clothes. She handed it over and whispered, "Cover your eyes. Men and women shouldn't touch each other. Don't look around." Ha! Ningchen chuckled and didn't say much. He took the cloth and blindfolded his eyes. He did everything according to his maid's instructions. "You just need to support her." Ruoshi grabbed the former's hand and guided him to support Hong Wulei. Then, she carefully applied the ointment and bandaged the wound. "Young master, when will she wake up?" Ruoshi asked softly while bandaging the wound. "Let's do it tonight. It's just a small injury. It won't get in the way," Ningchen said casually. "How is this a small injury? She's a woman. If she heard your words, she would die from anger. Young master, you must learn to have tender feelings for the fairer sex." Ruoshi's tone carried a trace of dissatisfaction. Ningchen smiled. He knew that he couldn't afford to offend this girl on this topic, so he didn't continue the conversation. Not long after, Ruoshi bandaged the wound and carefully put on Hong Wulei's clothes. Then, she said, "Okay, you can take the cloth off your eyes." Ningchen took off the cloth and opened his eyes. He looked at Ruoshi in front of him and said, "The fish is almost done roasting. Let's rest here today." And Ruoshi nodded. This woman's injury was not light. It was indeed inappropriate to take her on the road. Waiting for a night might be the best choice. Simply tidying up a place to lie down, Ningchen helped Hong Wulei to the top. Then, he walked to the fire and sat there with Ruoshi, quietly watching her eat. Ruoshi tore the fish bit by bit and ate it in small bites. Although the young master's tea-making skills were not good, his roasting skills were definitely not comparable to anyone. In the beginning, little Mingyu was picky and often unwilling to eat. The young master's skill in roasting fish was basically ground by Mingyu bit by bit. The sky gradually darkened and the night was cold and humid. Ningchen stoked the bonfire even more to dispel the surrounding cold air for the woman beside him. After a tiring day, Ruoshi lay down next to the bonfire and fell asleep after a while. Under the light of the fire, her face was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. Ningchen sat quietly to the side, using his phoenix energy to comb the former's body. Right now, the only person left beside him was Ruoshi. Although she was only his maid in name, in reality, she was the one he couldn't bear to part with. Once the phoenix energy entered her body, the fatigue between Ruoshi's eyebrows eased slightly and gradually relaxed. The night was getting deeper and deeper. When the moon was high in the sky, the unconscious Hong Wulei's fingers moved slightly. The next moment, her eyes slowly opened. After a trace of confusion, she quickly recovered her clarity. A strange breath not far away startled Hong Wulei. She hurriedly got up and grabbed the dagger at her waist. "Quiet." Ningchen glanced at the former and whispered. Only then did Hong Wulei react. After seeing the woman sleeping next to the red-clothed young man, she immediately quieted down. Ningchen didn't speak anymore and sat there quietly, guarding the most important person around him. Hong Wulei also wanted to understand what was going on. Her eyes looked at the bonfire in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. At dawn, Ruoshi woke up. After seeing the young master beside her, she smiled sweetly. "Young master." Before she finished speaking, Ruoshi's eyes caught sight of Hong Wulei, who woke up not far away. Her face showed surprise. Ignoring her young master, she got up and walked forward. She whispered, "You're awake. How do you feel?" Looking at the woman in front of her, a smile flashed across Hong Wulei's face. There was gratitude, but she still didn't speak. Ruoshi frowned slightly. "What's going on?" "She can't speak," Ningchen said. When he checked her injuries, he found that this woman was mute. No wonder he didn't see her say a word in their 2 encounters. "Can it be cured?" Ruoshi's eyes flashed with a touch of pity and asked. Her veins were sealed by herself. Whether it can be cured or not, it's not up to others. Ning Chen replied. Hong Wulei looked at Ruoshi and shook her head with a smile, meaning it's fine. Ruoshi sighed in her heart and whispered, "What's your name?" Hong Wulei picked up a branch and wrote her name in front of her. Her name was like her person, Hong Wulei. Hong Wulei. Ruoshi whispered. The name was very pleasant to hear, but it always gave people a sad feeling. It's dawn, let's go. Ning Chen got up, waved his hand to summon the ghost palanquin, and calmly said. Hong Wulei glanced at the ghost palanquin filled with ghost energy, and a strange light flashed in her eyes. After returning to her senses, she pointed to herself, then to the palanquin, and gently shook her head, indicating that she could go on her own. Ning Chen didn't force her. He put away the palanquin, extinguished the bonfire on the ground, and immediately prepared to continue on their journey. Ruoshi helped Hong Wulei up and followed him. They weren't far from the nearest city, but with a wounded person, their speed was a lot slower. Ning Chen didn't care. He walked as fast as the two behind him. Along the way, Ruoshi and Hong Wulei whispered something. Although Hong Wulei couldn't speak, her gestures and writing were something Ruoshi could barely understand. Hong Wulei was a little afraid of Ning Chen, but she liked Ruoshi very much. After talking along the way, the relationship between the two quickly got closer. When the sky was about to turn dark, the three finally arrived at the nearest Chiyi city. They found a nearby inn and booked 2 rooms to rest. Ruoshi said she wanted to take care of Hong Wulei, so she didn't ask for a separate room. Ning Chen wasn't worried that Hong Wulei would harm Ruoshi. His room was next door. This distance couldn't stop him. Young master, the bed is ready. Please rest early. Ruoshi turned her head and said. N. Ning Chen nodded. Young master, let's stop here for a few days. Miss Wu Lei's injury is not light. She needs to rest. Ruoshi stepped forward and asked. Okay, whatever you say. Ning Chen whispered. Young master is the best. Ruoshi smiled and said. Oh, you really know how to talk. Ning Chen laughed. Please rest early. I won't talk with you anymore. Miss Wu Lei still needs someone to take care of her. After speaking, Ruoshi didn't stay any longer. She walked out of the room, gently closed the door, and walked to the room next door. In the next room, Hong Wulei was sitting on the bed. After seeing Ruoshi walk in, a smile appeared on her face. I've already sent young master to rest. In fact, you don't have to be so afraid of him. Young master is very easy to talk to. Ruoshi stepped forward and raised the pillow behind the woman and whispered. Hong Wulei chuckled and pointed to the former and then to herself. What she meant was that for that young master, the two of them were different. Although it was that young master who saved her, the one who really made the difference was Ruoshi. She knew very well that young master was definitely not a soft-hearted person. Wulei, we will stay here for a few days. After your injury is almost healed, we will continue on our journey. However, the place I and young master are going to is a bit far. Do you want to go together? Speaking of this, Ruoshi hesitated for a moment and whispered, I heard from young master what kind of organization Yu Luo Life Extermination Gate is. If possible, you'd better not go back. Such a life is too dangerous after all. Revenge. Hong Wulei stretched out her hand and gently wrote a word on the quilt. The secret hidden in her heart for many years was revealed for the first time today. In the next room, Ning Chen stood in front of the window and quietly looked at the night scene outside. His eyes flashed with thoughts. This Hong Wulei is not simple. She sealed her ability to speak with the meridian sealing technique. If it's not a big conspiracy, then it's a big enmity. Yu Luo Life Extermination Gate was the top assassin organization in the entire Southern Tomb. It was rumored that the 3 sect masters were each more terrifying than the other. The major sects and dynasties were very afraid of them. Hong Wulei's aptitude was also first class among the people he had seen. It's just that she lacked the guidance of a strong master. That's why she was inferior to young geniuses like Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu. In the next room, Ruoshi looked at the life story written by Hong Wulei. Her eyes reddened and flashed with unbearable tears. "Can I let young master teach you?" Ruoshi whispered. Although she didn't know how powerful young master was, he should be much more powerful than many people. Hong Wulei was slightly startled when she heard this. She subconsciously looked at the side room with fear in her eyes. Chapter 4:15. At dawn, Ruoshi knocked on the door next door. After hearing the young master's reply, she gently pushed the door open and entered. "Young master, Ruoshi greets you," Ruoshi said with a smile on her face. Ningchen glanced at Ruoshi who came in, and the corner of his mouth curved slightly. This girl most likely has something to ask of him. "Young master, can Ruoshi ask you for a favor?" Sure enough, Ruoshi stepped forward and gently massaged his shoulders. "Say it." Ningchen smiled. "Can you give some pointers to Wu Lei's cultivation?" "Just a few days will do." Ruoshi used some strength in her hands and requested. Ningchen turned his head slightly and looked at Ruoshi who was close at hand. He teased, "It seems that you two are getting along well. You sold your young master out so quickly. Young master, did you agree?" Ruoshi's eyes flashed with expectation. "And?" Ningchen nodded gently. He didn't care about Hong Wulei, but he didn't want to refuse Ruoshi's request. "Thank you, young master." Ruoshi smiled and immediately called the woman who had been waiting outside the room. "Wu Lei, the young master has agreed. Hurry up and come over." As soon as her voice fell, Hong Wulei walked into the room with a bit of nervousness and gratitude on her beautiful face. She respectfully bowed. "These 2 days, you should recuperate first. 2 days later, we will set off. Before we reach the Yuheng Holy Land, you can learn as much as you can," Ningchen said calmly. Hong Wulei nodded silently. She knew that this was her best opportunity. Whether she could truly become a powerhouse or not depended on how much she could comprehend along the way. 2 days wasn't a long time. For a cultivator, it was a blink of an eye. Although Hong Wulei's injuries hadn't healed yet, she had no problem walking like an ordinary person. 2 days later, Ningchen took the two to continue their journey. Ruoshi intended to give Hong Wulei more opportunities to receive guidance, so every once in a while, she would pretend to be tired and ask for a rest. Ningchen clearly saw through his maid's thoughts, but he didn't point it out. According to the agreement, he seriously guided Hong Wulei's cultivation. No matter how the world tries to beautify the essence of swords and sabers, they are still killing weapons in the end. How you use the weapons in your hands will have a decisive impact on your strength. Your foundation isn't bad, but you're overly focused on your moves. Although your opponent might be temporarily at a disadvantage because they're not familiar with your style, the more experienced a person is, the faster they'll be able to adapt. Your advantage will quickly disappear, and it might even become a disadvantage. As he spoke, Ningchen's figure flashed and dodged the blade. He condensed his sword finger and attacked Ningchen's heart meridian. Hong Wulei wanted to block, but his saber was tied to itself. It was too late for him to block. Can you see why? In front of his chest, Ningchen stopped moving his fingers and said calmly, "The more complicated a move is, the more flaws it will have, and the slower it will be to counterattack. Unless you have an overwhelming amount of true origin, if you pursue complicated moves too much, you'll just be spinning a cocoon around yourself." After saying all this, Ningchen didn't say anything else. He walked away, leaving her to practice on her own. "Is that all?" When Ruoshi saw her young master coming over, she couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. "He only gave a few words of advice, isn't that too fast? It's already a lot. Everything has to be done step by step." "There's no need to rush," Ningchen replied. Ruoshi didn't quite understand, but if her young master said it was a lot, then it really was a lot. Looking at the woman practicing hard in front of her, Ruoshi sighed and said softly, "Young master, after your guidance, with Wulei's current cultivation, is it possible for him to defeat a three-disaster powerhouse?" "It's very difficult," Ning Chen said honestly. Hong Wulei's cultivation was at the third Xiantian tribulation, far from the three disasters. Although it wasn't impossible for him to go against the flow, the premise was that he had an absolutely powerful trump card. In the past, Senior was able to fight against the invincible martial monarch with a fourth tribulation cultivation. That was because Senior's sword was incomparably accurate. The martial monarch's moves were blocked, making it difficult for him to display his full strength. The other person was Mu Bai. In this world, Mu Bai was probably the person closest to the Sword of Origin. It was difficult to measure him with his realm. In addition to these two, there were several others. Although they were a bit lacking in height, they could still barely fight across realms. For example, Luan Fengchen, Mu Qian Shang, Barbarian King, and so on. Such people were very rare. Hong Wulei obviously hadn't reached this level yet, so he could only do his best. The southern tomb was much bigger than expected. The three walked and stopped for more than a month, but they had only covered less than a third of the distance. They were still far from the Jade Holy Land. For more than a month, Hong Wulei abandoned his previous tricky habits and simplified the complicated. Starting from the most basic, he honed his own moves and styles. Ning Chen didn't teach him much. Occasionally, he would point out the deviation in his moves, but he didn't teach him any techniques or moves. Hong Wulei didn't have any dissatisfaction and improved his habits little by little. He was diligent, but not greedy. The woman's perseverance was impressive. Although Ning Chen didn't ask, he could more or less guess that the woman in front of him who was practicing hard should have a great hatred buried deep in her heart. Ning Chen had always regarded the Buddhist saying of repaying grievances as nonsense. If any hatred could be forgiven, then what was the use of morality and law in the world? Whether or not Hong Wulei could take revenge in the future, he didn't have the qualifications to care. Because of Ruoshi's soft-heartedness, their fate was only on this road. When the road ended, their fate would end. As for how much she could improve, it would depend on her own good fortune. No one could decide the fate of others, and he was the same. The road had to be walked by oneself. If Hong Wulei chose to take revenge, then she must be prepared to bear all the consequences. Living was luck, dying was fate. More than a month later, the Jade Holy Land was getting closer and closer. It was no longer as unreachable as before. Ruoshi's eyes flashed with worry. She knew that the Jade Holy Land wasn't far away, which meant that the young master's time to guide Hong Wulei was getting less and less. "Young master, she no longer has any relatives. Please help her again." Ruoshi couldn't bear it and begged again. She understood how difficult it was for a lonely woman to live in this world. If she hadn't been brought back to the Marquis mansion by the young master, perhaps she wouldn't have had the courage to continue living. Hong Wulei was stronger than her. For so many years, she had silently endured too much suffering. In order to hide her identity, she didn't hesitate to seal her meridians and make herself lose the ability to speak. For more than 10 years, she couldn't speak a word. What kind of perseverance was needed to bear such suffering? Ning Chen was silent for a moment. Then, he picked up a branch from the ground and looked at Hong Wulei in front of him. He calmly said, "Attack." Hong Wulei nodded and stepped forward. The long sword in her hand swept out. It was a simple move, but it was more difficult to resist than before. Hong Wulei's strange movement technique flashed across the water. When the sword fell, Hong Wulei's figure dissipated. It was just an afterimage. Hong Wulei was startled. Without thinking, he changed the direction of his saber and held it in a reverse grip, slashing behind him. Good reaction. Behind Hong Wulei's figure condensed, but the moment the sword approached, it dissipated again. Hong Wulei had never seen such a movement technique before. The more she fought, the more shocked she became. She never thought that there was such an exquisite movement technique in the world. "Paw!" The branch was knocked down. Hong Wulei's right hand went numb. She couldn't hold the cold sword in her hand and it fell to the ground. Red light flashed. Ning Chen stopped and looked at the woman in front of him. He said seriously, "There are traces of my footsteps on the ground. Remember it carefully and practice seriously. This is for you to save your life." Hong Wulei was startled. She quickly recovered and respectfully bowed. She would never forget the kindness of teaching her. In the last month or so, Ning Chen didn't teach her anything. Most of the time, Hong Wulei practiced silently. Occasionally, she would ask for advice if she couldn't figure it out. The 4-month journey had finally come to an end. The Jadeite Holy Land was close at hand. For the first time, Hong Wulei took the initiative to challenge her benefactor to verify the results of the past 4 months. Ning Chen didn't refuse. Although he sealed his sword and replaced it with a dry branch, he met the cold sword he taught. There was no surprise in the outcome of the battle. Hong Wulei was still defeated. There was an absolute gap in the combat experience between the two. It was not something that could be erased with 4 months of hard work. However, Hong Wulei's improvement was very obvious. At least, it was impossible for him to break the weapon in his hand like he did 4 months ago without taking a step back. At the end of the battle, Hong Wulei put away her sword and respectfully bowed to her benefactor in front of her. Parting was imminent. Ruoshi's eyes were filled with tears. In the past 4 months, the two had almost become friends who talked about everything. However, they both had their own things to do. It was impossible for them to always walk the same path. Ruoshi stepped forward and hugged her goodbye. She whispered, "Don't force yourself too much. If you encounter trouble that you can't deal with, come to us." Hong Wulei nodded. Although she was reluctant, she still hardened her heart and turned away. A cold wind blew past, and the dark red figure gradually disappeared into the distance. Not long after, she disappeared. "Let's go too." Ning Chen looked at Ruoshi and said. "N." Ruoshi put away her thoughts and responded. Half a day later, the two stepped into the territory of the Yuheng Holy Land. As an inheritance that was on an equal footing with the Tianshu dynasty, there were countless powerhouses in the Yuheng Holy Land. Xiantian masters could be seen everywhere. The deacon elders were at least above the 5th tribulation. Ning Chen came to find the art of resurrection. Therefore, he deliberately chose the identity of an outer disciple. First, it wouldn't arouse suspicion. Second, it was to stay as far away as possible from the old ancestor in the Yuheng Holy Land who was close to the perfect realm. The art of resurrection was a secret art of the Yuheng Holy Land. The difficulty of obtaining it was not ordinary. Especially when there was a top powerhouse who was close to the perfect realm in charge here, it was even more difficult. The majestic Holy Land was like a fairyland on earth. Under the fairyland, thousands of peaks surrounded and guarded. Tens of thousands of outer disciples lived here, practicing martial arts. They hoped that one day they could enter the mountain and become the most glorious inner disciple. The desire for longevity drove countless people to worship the mountain day and night. Some gave up wealth, and some gave up power. Ning Chen lived at the foot of the mountain, looking at the mountain in the distance. He waited for several months. Chapter 4:16. At the top of the mountain, a decree was issued. The triennial inter-sect disciple competition had begun. The ban on the mountain was temporarily lifted, and the outer sect disciples were allowed to attend the competition. Within the sacred grounds, experts were as numerous as the clouds, and the inner court disciples were even the backbone of Jade Hall. There were innumerable congenital realm experts, and there were even some outstanding figures that weren't inferior to the deacon elders. At the top of the mountain, the iron chains pierced through the clouds. The waves wriggled as the 16 black iron chains locked onto the battling platform at the top of the sky. Sabers and swords clashed. The chi of the sabers and swords dispersed, interweaving into a dazzling martial art that captured one's mind. The strongest disciples of the inner sect had officially faced off against each other. This time, the grand competition would not only determine the ranking of the inner sect disciples, but also the qualifications to participate in the 100 Empire competition. As an inheritance that was equally famous as the Tianshu dynasty, the Yuheng sacred ground was similarly ranked in the 100 dynasties. The top 3 that were determined this time would represent the Yuheng sacred ground to participate in the 100 dynasty competition that was about to arrive. The 2 strongest people in Alioth were without a doubt. The first was the top inner court disciple that had successively won 3 competitions, Yi Nishuan, and the second was a woman called Lian Hongzhu. Her strength might not be inferior to Yi Nishuan, but she kept a slightly lower profile and very rarely used her full strength. Their strength had already reached half a step into the 3 disasters realm, or even the 3 disasters realm, far surpassing the others. As long as nothing unexpected happened, they would definitely obtain the qualifications to participate in the 100 Empire competition. The real suspense was who among the 300 inner disciples would be able to obtain the last spot. Deacon Elder, we are also disciples of the Holy Land. Shouldn't we also have the qualifications to compete for the 100 Empire competition? Among the tens of thousands of Outer Sanctum disciples, there was no lack of Xiantian realm experts. Naturally, they were unwilling to give up the opportunity that all the martial artists in the world wanted. They looked at the 5 deacon elders sitting outside the martial arts sparring platform and argued with reason. Elders, please give us a chance. Another few inborn experts stood out and bowed respectfully. With someone taking the lead, at this moment, the tens of thousands of outer court disciples at the peak of the mountain were no longer willing to just be spectators. Their voices were like a huge wave that shook the entire mountain, causing the expressions of the 5 deacon elders to change. Qingwei, as they wish, as long as someone can defeat the top 10 inner disciples, we'll give them a chance. Just as the 5 deacon elders were unable to make a decision, a calm voice rang out from the depths of the mountain. Yes. In the middle of the 5, a gray-robed, white-haired old man respectfully accepted the order. At the foot of the mountain, Ning Chen gazed at the top of the mountain. The light in his eyes kept flickering. He was not interested in the 100 Empire competition, but this was indeed the best time to go up the mountain to look for the art of rebirth. Red clothes moved. Flowing light flashed in an instant, so fast that it was hard to see clearly. The competition at the peak of the mountain was still ongoing. The selection of tens of thousands of outer disciples took up most of the Holy Land's attention. No one noticed that at the foot of the mountain, a red shadow flashed past and directly entered the depths of the mountain. The red light rushed into the profound pavilion, and the mechanisms were activated one after another. However, the speed of the red light was so fast that all the mechanisms in the pavilion were rendered useless. In the blink of an eye, Ning Chen arrived on the last floor of the Profound Secrets Pavilion. He scanned the floor with his divine sense, then took a step forward and appeared in front of a shrine. He flipped his palm over and looked at the jade slip inside, his eyes narrowing. Is this it? Sir, don't you think it's a bit rude for you to barge into the Alioth Forbidden Land? A white-robed man walked out. He had a sword on his back, and his aura was extremely powerful. I had no choice. I'm sorry. Ning Chen looked at him warily. This was the first time he had encountered a true expert since coming to Nanling. This art of rebirth requires the Alioth Divine Cauldron to be effective. Sir, you've come here for nothing. In addition, this art of rebirth is a secret of the Alioth Holy Land. Anyone who sees it will have to leave behind their life. You should think carefully about whether you want to see it, said the man calmly. Ning Chen sighed and took the jade slip. He had already come this far. How could he give up now? The man didn't stop him. He calmly waited for him to finish. This young man in front of him was not ordinary. He couldn't easily defeat him. After Ning Chen finished looking through the jade slip, he put it back. This person hadn't lied to him. This art of rebirth truly did require the Alioth Divine Cauldron to be effective. The Profound Secrets Pavilion is too small. Let's go outside and fight. The man didn't say anything else. He turned and walked away. Ning Chen followed. The ceremony was over. All that was left was a true life and death battle. Below the Profound Secrets Pavilion, 4 Grand Elders of the Alioth Holy Land appeared. They were all experts of the second calamity. When they saw the azure-robed man walk out, they courteously bowed. Greetings, Enforcement Elder. Within the Alioth Holy Land, aside from the sect master and patriarch, the person with the highest status was this Enforcement Elder. Behind him was Ning Chen. He was wearing red robes, and his expression was calm. He didn't seem the slightest bit timid. The 4 Grand Elders frowned. They had thought that the intruder was some old monster from a large power. They hadn't expected him to be so young. Xiao Wuming, please advise me. Nameless sword, Xiao Wuming said calmly as he looked at the young man before him. Please. Ning Chen raised his index and middle finger. Sword intent began to revolve around him. Outside the battle, the 4 Grand Elders stood guard, blocking all paths of retreat to prevent the red-robed young man from leaving. Xiao Wuming's body moved. His sword flashed, and the wind and clouds changed. An extremely powerful sword intent slashed down, illuminating the entire mountain. The red-robed young man also moved, dodging the attack. His finger condensed yuan, and spiritual qi filled the sky. With a slash of his sword, the earth shook and mountains collapsed. Heaven and earth trembled. As soon as the 2 experts clashed, they knew that their opponents weren't ordinary. One was powerful, while the other was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they had crossed paths several times. The battle had reached a shocking level. Master! Sensing her master's sword intent, Bai Hongzhu's expression changed slightly. With a graceful step, she disappeared from her original spot. Yi Nishuan also sensed the aura of the battle in the distance. His figure flickered, and he quickly rushed over. In front of the Profound Secrets Pavilion, 2 swords were clashing. The strongest sword was unleashed to its peak, causing the 4 Grand Elders to become more and more shocked. They really couldn't imagine that such a young man could fight the Enforcement Elder to a standstill. It was too inconceivable. For thousands of years, there had been countless geniuses, but any genius needed time to grow. This generation's Yi Nishuan and Bai Hongzhu were already incredible geniuses, but compared to the young man in front of them, they were clearly not on the same level. What the 4 of them didn't know was that comparing the current generation with the red-robed young man was unfair to Yi Nishuan and the others. That was because the environment they grew up in was different, and the tribulations they experienced were also different. There was simply no comparison. In the chaotic times of the Divine Prefecture, great tribulations came one after another. And the people who fought with the Knowing Destiny realm were never from the younger generation. Talking about it was meaningless. When the battle reached its climax, a purple-robed middle-aged man walked out. Looking at the 2 people fighting, the light in his eyes kept flickering. Sect Master. The 4 Grand Elders bowed. Have you found out who this person is? Asked Sect Master Yuheng. I've already sent people to investigate, but it'll take some time, said one of the Grand Elders respectfully. Sect Master Yuheng nodded and didn't say anything else. He calmly watched the rarely seen battle of swords. Sword style, Heavenly Fall. In the battle, Hong Yi flipped his palm to block the attack. Immediately, he took advantage of the momentum to retreat. He leaped into the air and pointed his finger at the sword. Thousands of sword intents spread out. In the next moment, the sword intents fell from the sky. The terrifying sword aura was as if the 9 heavens had fallen. Xiao Wuming's expression became serious. His true yuan sword, and his sword left his hand and turned into a shield to block the heavenly fall. The 2 attacks collided. Heaven and earth changed color, and the mountain was unable to bear the huge impact. It immediately began to shake violently. Sect Master Yuheng narrowed his eyes and took a step forward. His true yuan spread out, stabilizing the shaking mountain. What a terrifying young man. This kind of height had far surpassed the younger generation. It was unheard of. Not far away, Yi Nishuan and Bai Hongzhu arrived. When they saw the battle, their expressions changed. The two of you should watch carefully. This young man's martial cultivation base might not be as high as the enforcement elders, or even the two of you, but the height of his sword is truly shocking. Even the enforcement elder is a bit inferior, said Sect Master Yuheng seriously. All the experts of the world, from Xiantian to the Three Calamities, walked the same path. But the 3,000 paths of the Grand Tao all led to the same destination. Sometimes, cultivation base wasn't the only factor that determined strength. This young man's sword was truly shocking. Adding on his speed, it wasn't strange for him to be able to fight the enforcement elder to this extent. However, what he cared about the most was that this person still hadn't pulled out his sword. That meant this person still wasn't at his strongest state. Sword style, Nirvana. The Nirvana sword appeared once more. Scarlet swords appeared one after another, transforming into a stream of swords that shot out. Xiao Wuming's eyes narrowed. His left hand pointed forward, drawing in Yuan energy to assist his sword. Azure light illuminated the night sky. His sword collided with the Nirvana sword. The sword wills collided, and the aftershocks cut open one huge ravine after another on the ground. The unimaginable battle of swords caused the ground to collapse. Even with the protection of Sect Master Yuheng and the four Grand Elders, it was difficult to stop the fact that the mountain's appearance was rapidly changing. Outside the battle, Yin Yishuan and Bai Hongzhu were watching with rapt attention. Seeing this terrifying battle, they felt an unprecedented shock. So there was already someone in the younger generation who had reached such a height. Reporting to Sect Master, we've already investigated this person's origin. He's an outer disciple that Crimson Lotus Peak only recruited 3 months ago. He comes from the Eastern Tianshu dynasty. His background and status are ordinary. He should be intentionally hiding something, said a deacon elder respectfully. Sect Master Yuheng nodded. Knowing this was enough. If he hadn't guessed wrong, this person should have come from the other 4 regions. He wasn't someone from the southern tomb. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to not have heard of such a powerful young expert. Wuming, there's no need to continue fighting. Stop. Sect Master Yuheng moved and arrived beside Xiao Wuming. He extended his hand and pressed down on the sword he was about to unsheath. Xiao Wuming nodded and did not attack again. He sheathed his sword and stopped fighting. Friend, why don't we talk inside? Sect Master Yuheng looked at the young man in front of him. Deference is no substitute for obedience. Ning Chen nodded and restrained his sword insight as he spoke calmly, "You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."